Good evening, folks. This is our last meeting on the subject of the land swap. We have a pretty full agenda, so we'll start. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting the same on the bulletin board of Town Hall and forwarded a copy to the Courier News and Star Ledger at least 48 hours prior to the meeting, all in accordance with the Open Publics Meeting Act. This meeting will not substantially go past 10:30. Clerk, please call the roll.
Here.
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 Here. Would you please rise and join me for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I ask that for a moment that you remain standing? This weekend actually, in our community, we lost a dear friend, Ken Stiefel. Ken was a valuable member of the GL community, was very instrumental in TV 34, and usually you saw Ken up there with his jeans on and his suspenders, and I believe he passed away this weekend, so we'd just like to observe one moment of silence in memory of Ken. Thank you very much. Tonight we continue the transfer of property between the Church of the Little Flower and the Township of Berkeley Heights and the redevelopment plan for the municipal complex. The Mayor and Council of the Township of Berkeley Heights will hold hearings with respect to the transfer of property between the Township and the Church of the Little Flower and the redevelopment of the existing municipal complex. The dates and subject matter of each meeting are listed, and this will be our last one. Scheduled discussion of the topics are subject to change. Each meeting will begin at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. Presentations will be made as required by the subject matter. Each meeting will be included in the opportunity for questions and comments. Tonight we have our planner, Mike Mistretta, who will be, the list of documents is there, and without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Mistretta.
Thank you. In the handout that you have tonight, there is a list of documents. I just want to make sure, I just want to walk through those quickly and then start the presentation. Everybody was handed out a meeting agenda. I'm sorry. There are meeting agendas all the way up on top. If you want to take a moment to get a copy. What the meeting agenda, we have a handout tonight, and the purpose for that is at the last hearing, at the end of the meeting, we went through basically the numbers, the cost and so forth, and there's a lot of numbers that were thrown out there. And what we thought better tonight was if we could reduce that to one page and attach the sketch that goes along with it. You heard a lot of talk about option 1, option 2, and a lot of numbers that were thrown out there. And so what we decided to do tonight was, it's kind of taking a step back, going back to the end of last meeting, but we've prepared a handout. It's up on top here, and it shows option 1, which is the reconstruction of the municipal complex at Park Avenue. It walks you through what would be included as part of that project, as well as the cost. And attached to option 1 is the sketch that the architects presented at the last meeting of what that development would look like if we reconstructed everything at the existing municipal complex. Option 2 is if we were to do the swap, if we were to relocate the municipal complex to the Hamilton Avenue and Snyder Avenue properties. And again, it walks you through the numbers, all of the estimated costs that were discussed over the last 3 hearings, and it's reduced to a final net estimated project cost at the bottom, along with what is projected as the estimated tax increase on the average residential home. Both option 1 and option 2 include those numbers, and option 2 also includes a second number at the bottom which is the annual estimated tax increase on the average residential home with a pilot, which if you give me a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through that exercise. In tonight's book that will be hand-delivered to the township clerk and be provided a hard copy along with the CDs. The documents that will be in tonight's binder will be the meeting agenda that you have in the back of the room, the complete PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to walk through right now. Every slide is going to be provided. There will also be a spreadsheet of the tax evaluation with and without the pilot as prepared by the township CFO. That document essentially takes the numbers that the accountants provided last week, and then we ran through an exercise of the impact of a pilot. So those documents will be part of the binder for this tonight's evening. And there will also be a traffic impact assessment of what happens with what's the traffic impacts for these projects, starting with the impact on Snyder Avenue as well as Hamilton Avenue. And then there's an entirely separate traffic impact study that was performed based on the redevelopment plan that I'm going to walk you through here. I'll touch upon it at the end of the presentation, but all of the projections, all of the numbers, the queuing, all of the traffic numbers, and et cetera, are contained in those reports. They're all on tonight's disc. They're all in tonight's binder. What I'd like to do is I'm going to walk over to the table, and I'm going to start the PowerPoint and walk everybody through that. The municipal complex redevelopment plan. There are 7 components of it: existing conditions, redevelopment law, redevelopment plan, the conceptual site plan, demographics, which speaks about the number estimated of public school-aged children, pilot and municipal revenue, and then the project schedule and other considerations. Under existing conditions, there's just a series of slides. I know we're familiar with it, but it's just part of the redevelopment plan to talk about the existing conditions. We're familiar with our municipal building and the situation with our parking along our front lawn there, along the railroad tracks. The Recreation Commission building, which is converted from a single-family home. Our existing DPW yard and fueling station. Our municipal salt storage facility and storage yard, and a number of sheds and storage areas. And this is the police trailer building, and just more trailer parking and storage area in the back parking lots. So that's, everybody's familiar with that. I just wanted to walk you through there. This is the existing conditions map. This is the map that is currently in Town Hall on one of the exhibits that we introduced on the very first evening. You can see on the magenta is the outline of the property. And the next slide shows you the individual lots that make up the overall complex, as well as the Columbus Avenue unimproved right-of-way and the section that is improved, as well as the Berkeley Avenue right-of-way. In the back here, on the western section of the property, there is a non-delineated wetland area. There's an environmentally sensitive area back there. My firm back in, I think it was 2003, we were asked to do a study back there to see if there was any environmentally sensitive areas back there, and we located the wetland flags, and we had a biologist go out there and locate it. We have that information, so I show it on tonight's slide. I just want to be very, very clear. This was never submitted as part of a letter of interpretation and never went so far as down to the Department of Environmental Protection. The study never went anywhere. So we did the flagging back then. There's a very good opportunity. It looks differently and maybe shaped differently than it is right now, but that was the situation back in approximately 2004, it may have been 2003. Around that wetland area is what's called a wetland transition area. That's the green line you see. And associated with that would be a 50-foot buffer, a 50-foot wetland buffer, most likely. Again, you don't get the deep. Yes, I do. Here is the wetland area, the one that's shaded in right here. This is what's called a wetland transition area, the green line that wraps around it. And that little label right there just says 50-foot buffer area. That has not been confirmed by the DEP. You will only get that confirmation of this area after you submit what's called a letter of interpretation to the DEP. They issue a legal document that establishes the wetland points, the wetland areas, and they also assign a number to the wetlands. It's either 0, generally 0, 50, or 150. Most of the cases in this general area, it's a 50-foot buffer. You get into 150-foot buffers under endangered and threatened species and a certain other criteria. So the purpose of this slide is to show you what the development constraints are and what we have to deal with as we move forward on the redevelopment of the project. Then we go to redevelopment law. Redevelopment plan is governed by the local redevelopment and housing law. That's different from your general regulations, your municipal land use law. We're under a different type of law in this project, local redevelopment and housing law. I don't expect everybody to read all of that. I just wanted to know when you get your slide, if you want to know exactly what a redevelopment plan is, that is a technical definition. I'll read part of it, but the redevelopment plan is generally what's known as a mini master plan just for this property. It's customized as we see fit, as this community sees fit for this particular piece of property. It's not a zoning ordinance. It contains a lot more information than a zoning ordinance. A zoning ordinance is a very simple document. As you'll see as I go through this, a redevelopment plan, there's an awful lot to it. No redevelopment project shall be undertaken or carried out except in accordance with the redevelopment plan adopted by ordinance of the municipal governing body. What does that mean? It means that everything that we talk about tonight is an exercise. And there's no vote being taken. This is all preliminary. This is just informational. Should this project go forward, there has to be a separate public hearing in front of council advertised just for the redevelopment plan, at which time public comment is taken in consideration and so forth. The redevelopment plan shall include an outline for the planning, development, redevelopment, or rehabilitation of the project area, sufficient to indicate. And it talks about local objectives, land uses, density, population, traffic, public transportation, public utilities, recreational, community facilities, and other public improvements. In other words, the redevelopment plan has to touch upon how it's going to impact the community on all of those issues. Proposed land uses and building requirements in the project area have to be specified. And any significant relationship to the redevelopment plan, to the master plans of other contiguous municipalities, the master plan of the county, as well as the state development and redevelopment plan. So you have to show how this redevelopment plan fits into all those other documents. A redevelopment plan may include the provision of affordable housing in accordance with the Fair Housing Act and the housing element of the municipal master plan. The redevelopment plan shall describe its relationship to the pertinent municipal development regulations as defined in the municipal land use law. And the redevelopment plan shall supersede applicable provisions of the development regulations of the municipality or constitute an overlay zoning district within that redevelopment area. What does that mean? Most of you are familiar with this book here. This is the Township Municipal Land Use Ordinance. and it controls the development of the properties in the town. What the redevelopment plan can either supersede this document, or it can be an overlay zoning district. I would highly recommend that it's an overlay zoning district. Why? Because just say you adopt a redevelopment plan, and then the redevelopment plan never goes anywhere. So for whatever reason, it never gets developed. What happens is it's an overlay, and the underlying zoning, which is open lands, remains intact. So the redevelopment plan only, even after it's adopted, if you do it as an overlay district, it only becomes active if the project moves forward. The underlying zoning does not change on the project, and that's what the way I would recommend that we move forward. Prior to the adoption of the redevelopment plan, the planning board shall transmit to the council within 45 days after referral a report containing its recommendation concerning the redevelopment plan. So, redevelopment plan is adopted, first reading of the ordinance, it gets sent over to the planning board. Planning board prepares a report, they send it back to council. The planning board report shall include an identification of any provisions in the proposed redevelopment plan which are inconsistent with the master plan, and any recommendations concerning these inconsistencies and any other matters as the board deems appropriate. The planning board is a very important board. They see all the applications come in on a monthly basis. They get it. They see parking, they see utilities, they see traffic, all of the issues that are discussed. The planning board sees that on a regular basis. They're also the board that prepares a master plan. So they have a lot of insight, and as a governing body, we can write anything we want, but the planning board takes a look at it, and they review it, and they provide their recommendations. The council is required to hold a public hearing on the redevelopment plan prior to its adoption. Like I said before, everything that we talk about tonight, this is just informational. It's to gain feedback, comments from this group. This is your community. This is your complex. This is your land. This is the first time you're seeing it. This is the first time council's seeing it. I know that because I just finished it earlier today. So this is a first run-through, if you will. So we expect comments, and we do expect some feedback to perfect it as we move forward. Then the redevelopment plan. What I've chosen is, in your town, you have an existing downtown DH, the DH Downtown Housing -18 zone district, which permits 18 units per acre. You also have a downtown housing, DH Downtown Housing -12 zone district, which permits 12 units per acre. What I've based this preliminary redevelopment plan on is a new zone called the proposed DH Downtown Housing 15 zone district, which would permit 15 units per acre. The principal permitted uses are the exact same uses that you have in your other districts, same as the other two, primarily townhouses with setbacks, side attached garages, townhouses with collective parking lots, courts or garages, multifamily structures including apartments or in vertical duplexes, parks and open space, and municipal buildings and other government uses. Nothing's new. If you open up your ordinance, you look under DH12, you look under DH18, same uses. Permitted accessory uses, same thing. Attached garages, shared parking lots, and common detached garages, surface or structured parking, and passive and active recreational uses. Height area bulk requirements. I've attached a chart which I hope you're able to read. And you could see this is still something that's, very, very preliminary. Out of all of this, let me get my pointer. There's really only one thing that's concerning here that I would draw your attention to, and that's maximum building height. What we've set it at is 2.5 stories or 36 feet for buildings fronting on Park Avenue. And then we have 3.5 stories or 48 feet for any building not fronting on Park Avenue, and you'll see that in a minute. This is the same as the DH12 districts, and we've actually made this more restrictive than those districts. I've actually split the two. And what we're calling for is shorter buildings along Park Avenue, so it's not overwhelming. And as you get into the project further in the back, you go back to what's permitted in existing DH districts. Other provisions, a mix of building heights shall be provided to break the roof lines and create architectural interest and variety at corners and points of visual interest. Chimneys, cupolas, and other corner architectural elements shall be encouraged, provided such shall not exceed the permitted height for the district by more than 15%. I'm going to run through a series of photographs in a minute once I go through these, and you'll see the photographs I'm going to show you, I don't want to misrepresent. They're only for architectural interest. It's to address these slides that I'm going through right now. Attached, combined, and multifamily structures shall not have a length in excess of 180 feet. That's assuming that if you have a 6-unit townhouse building and say they're 30 feet wide, you don't want anything more than that until there's breaks. And shall be designed with offsets or other architectural features so as to provide breaks in the linear plane of the structure. All building facades visible from the common areas and public ways shall include architectural elements and landscaping so as to avoid monotony and enhance their visual appeal. And the common open space and commuter parking spaces available for public use shall connect with existing or planned contiguous pedestrian walkways, plazas, and other open spaces, and shall be continuous, readily accessible to the public and to the Berkeley Heights train station. What we're going to do is create a series of public walkways from the train station to these units and the commuter parking spaces. Excuse me. All residential buildings shall be of varying size and heights and with attached setbacks, with varying setbacks so as to avoid long building lines which tend to act as a barrier. When you get into a townhouse, an apartment, a multifamily development, the biggest complaint you hear is it just looks like this big, huge old apartment complex with straight building lines for hundreds of feet and so forth, and they're very unsightly. And we're trying to make sure that that does not happen on this project. The DH-15 has a maximum density of 15 dwelling units per acre, like I said before. It may be increased for inclusionary housing only as required by the redevelopment plan. What we did was we used the 15 times 9. It comes out to a total of 135 units. Out of that 135, we set aside 35 for townhouses and then 50 for one-bedroom apartments or condos. You'll see in a minute, or 50 two-bedroom apartments or condos. There is an inclusionary housing component. No less than 10% of the total number of the market rate housing units in the DH-15 zone district shall be affordable housing units in accordance with the township ordinances and the township fair share housing plan. And then I have it in bold at the bottom. Redevelopment plan to meet the COA regulations at the time the project is approved. Why? Because right now, next month actually, November 2014, they're supposed to come out with a new set of rules. And the third round rules have been changed countless times. I can't even tell you anymore. I go to all these seminars and I listen to all these speakers, and it goes from the legislature to the court, back to the legislature, back to the court, whether COA is being disbanded or COA is being reformed under a different type of set of rules. It's very hard to keep up with it. Right now, your town is in very good shape, but it's my recommendation that you can't move forward with a project like this and not include a inclusionary housing component, because we don't want to get into the situation that we were in 20 years ago. Once things starts booming again and the new developments are coming in, the first thing developers are going to be looking for is, do you have enough affordable housing? So by including the component in here, we want to protect the town from that. So at the end of the day, we had 135 market units plus 30 COA units equals 148 total dwelling units would be the maximum density allowed on the project. Off-street parking would be consistent with the residential site improvement standards and the township ordinances. Right now, currently, we estimate that the existing commuter parking spaces is 70 spaces. We want to make sure that there's 70 spaces under the redevelopment plan. And the municipality to maintain control of the commuter parking spaces and the income generated by those spaces. What is the redevelopment plan not recommending? Any retail component. Why not? The idea is to use this property. It's a prime 9-acre parcel of land right next to a train station that has direct Midtown Manhattan access. We're surrounded by single-family homes to our west and to our south. We have our central business districts, DD, HB2, HB3, north of us across the tracks. The idea is to provide a type of mixed housing that will complement our downtown. What we don't want to do is bring the downtown into this project. Rather than we want the people who live in this community to support our downtown and make it stronger. We don't want to weaken the downtown because now we'd have a retail component on this property, and what it's going to do is undermine the efforts of rehabilitating and revitalizing our downtown. An increase in the number of commuter parking spaces. Why not? Why not put a couple hundred spaces on there and take care of the whole backlog of commuter parking? Traffic analysis won't allow it. And so the traffic will reach a critical point where it's not going to work, and the improvement, it's too dense for the site, okay? We started when we did the densities at 10 per acre, and then we also looked at 20 per acre. Then we went down to 18 per acre. Then we went up to 12 per acre. We tried to find that median, what the project and what the property can handle, what the roads can handle. And it's our opinion that we could not handle a major structured parking facility with several hundred parking spaces. It would just be too overwhelming for our local streets. So that's why we want to respect the fact that we have the 70 spaces there and maintain those, but not increase it. No roadway extension connections of Columbus Avenue to Forest Avenue. Why not? I'll get to a slide in a minute, but as you remember when I put up the wetland area, there's an environmentally sensitive area over there on the western portion of the property, and even though you may be able to get permits from the DEP to fill in some of those wetlands or disturb some of those trees and make that connection, we don't think it's a good idea. We think we should preserve those trees and preserve that wetland area over there and not make that connection. Somebody brought up to me, how about a pedestrian bridge over the railroad tracks to the train station so people don't have to walk so far? The starting numbers that I got were $1.2 million. That's why. That's the starting point, and I believe it's going to go higher than that once you get into environmental studies, engineering, and so forth. And while you may get NJ Transit on board and you may get the EDA down at state of New Jersey on board, it's too small of a site for 70 parking spaces. Unless we want to create a major transit hub, which we don't want, at least I'd recommend you don't do on this site, there's not going to be a walkway over the tracks. Why are they do we know if they're for sale or rental units? My opinion is, I don't know. To be evaluated as part of the RFP, RFQ process. Developers will be required to submit a detailed fiscal impact statement for the proposed project. Right now, the developers that I'm talking to, the market's coming back, but the market for condos is still very, very weak. Now, they both have different type of implications to the township, whether they're condos and for sale or rentals, and I'll get into that into a minute when I go through the RFP and RFQ process from the developers. Basically, we're going to have them submit the reports to the township, and the township will make that decision. And this is the conceptual site plan that we've come up with. Before I show it to you, I just want to stress again, this site plan is very preliminary. There's nothing set in stone. You're not going to walk out of here tonight and say, well, that's what it's going to look like. What I had to do was create a plan that shows what the density, what would it look like on a more spatial analysis, not a site plan analysis. It's a big difference. Just like when the architects were going through their presentation and they showed you the salt dome was here and the parking lot was here, they give you a spatial analysis of what that structure would look like on that piece of property. If this thing went out to, if this redevelopment plan went out to 10 different design firms and they would come back with 10 different proposals, entirely different from what you're about to see. So just keep in mind, this is just for spatial analysis to see what fits on this property, does it work, and it's a starting point for a discussion. If you go back to the original slide that I had for the existing conditions, what we did was we colored in green, dark green, the area that is outside of the environmentally sensitive areas, the wetlands, which is all in here. The wetlands are inside of here. We maintained the entire buffer as if this entire area was going to stay preserved. You'll also notice, excuse me, there's a good section of the parking lot, a good section of the property that goes beyond our property. You see that line right here, that magenta, that's our property line. And everything that's beyond that line, that's not us. That's NJ Transit's property. So that has to get chopped off there when this thing gets redeveloped. The first thing we did was we put a roadway network in. It'd be a private roadway network with common public access to it. And you'll see what we did was we lined up this road right on here on Bolton Boulevard. And we maintained the Berkeley Avenue. And there's an existing house right here with a driveway. There's an existing house right here with a driveway. So we want to respect the fact that this house continues to operate undisturbed. This house continues to operate undisturbed. Respect the properties that we're working around and protect the wetlands and use that as a buffer. The next thing we did was we created 2 commuter/visitor parking lots. A smaller one in this general location and a larger one over here, and you'll see why in a minute, why we separated them. The next thing that's hard to see, that last click, but we have streetscape improvements all the way from the commuter parking lot, all the way around, all the way out to the train station, and then all along Park Avenue, and then all the way into the development here. What we're trying to do is make sure this series of pedestrian walkways meet the downtown design standards and the beautification committee recommendations. Right now, there's a big push trying to get all the brick pavers, red brick pavers, herringbone patterns, ornamental street lights, street trees, etc., and have a safe passage, safe walkway for everybody to the train station. Then we added 35 townhouses. What does that look like? What we tried to do was place the front of these units along Park Avenue. We wanted to leave an open space, a green space over in here. Not that it's going to be a park, just going to be an open landscaped area. And we want the parking and the garages behind so you don't see them from the street. Everything walks off of here. And we're trying to do a shared parking system over in here. And all of these units, as you come down here, you only see the fronts and you don't see any driveways. All the driveways are located behind the buildings. You're going to get a lot nicer look of the street along here. And we want to maintain Park Avenue, what you would see along the frontage there and as you go down Plainfield Avenue. Then we added the apartments. What does that look like? Now we've put in 8 buildings. This could be in any configuration you want to come up with. Again, if you gave this to 10 different design teams, they're going to come up with 10 different solutions, a lot different from this one. What we thought about doing was we have a driveway over in here, and we put the units up against the wetlands without doing any buffer averaging or anything, respect here, so that these buildings here could have a nice view out to this way. This is several hundred feet of woodlands over in here. That you'd have these two over here, and then there's another two. Parking, and then also the shared parking with the visitor parking. What we don't want to do is overdevelop this with parking. It's very important because this intersection begins to fail. And then we just softened it up with some trees and vegetation. We would want a heavy vegetative buffer along the railroad tracks. We want the streetscape improvements all along Park Avenue, all the way into the site. And we keep this road right in here, the same thing with all of the trees, a heavy buffer of trees behind these residences. We did not want to put any buildings or anything over in here overlooking the backyards of these properties. We wanted to, if you see where the apartments are, they're overlooking either the railroad tracks, the wetlands, or parking, not somebody's backyard. And when I was going through those slides of the architecturals, what type of look are we looking for? This is a project called the Residences at Palmer Square down in Princeton. And we want to set design standards. I'm not saying it's going to be that particular building, but that's the look that we want to set the bar very, very high. When we talked about architectural height extensions, this is a height extension. This will go above the permitted, but it's only allowed in certain areas in order to provide a decorative appearance of the building. And these are just a series, if you just see how they do their pedestrian walkways, and from the street, if I go back to that last one, you know, just try and find a driveway on this development. It's very difficult. And these are just a series of slides of what we're trying to mimic on a much smaller scale. Our buildings would not be this tall. In the back they could be, but in the front, remember I said 36 feet. This is well above 36 feet. But it's the look that I'm asking you to take a look at, not the building height. It's just the overall appearance, how they put their ornamental street lights, how they've done some hedges along their walkways, and how they just do the ins and outs of the building. The architects can speak to this a lot better than I can. We don't want flat buildings, long flat buildings. This is how they've done their pedestrian walkways. They've done little bridges, little archways, and so forth. Just another corner. If this type of corner was constructed on a 2.5 scale level at the intersection of Park and Plainfield Avenue, and your townhouses were like that, along with your ornamental street lights and the street trees, and we had some fencing and so forth, that's the look that we're looking for. And you see the building fronts up on the street. The parking is all behind it. And at the end, that's what we trust. This look right in here, along Park Avenue, what are you going to see? We want you to see this on a smaller scale, and these could be back in here, again, on a smaller scale. And we want all the parking behind the buildings so you don't see any parking lots and cars. Demographics. There's a publication, November 2006. I know this is hard to read, but I wanted to make sure when you pick up your disc that you had where I'm going to come up with these numbers. It's Who Lives in New Jersey. It's done by the Rutgers Blaustein School. Most planners I know rely heavily on this publication. What this publication has done is it's gone out and it's studied transit-orientated developments, very similar to what we're proposing, and it's taken a look at the different demographics of different type of housing. I summarized it on this slide here. The total, at the end of the day, the total public school-age children estimate for this development is 19.83 children, or 20, we rounded up to 20 public school-age children. Why is this? This is a conservative, in my opinion, it's a conservative number because if you look at the bottom here, We did not take into consideration that it's a transit-orientated development. What is that? It's within walking distance of a train station, within walking distance of a bus routes. We're not taking into any of those factors or variables that we can use to lower this number, so we'd rather be a little bit conservative. I don't expect you to read this, but when you pick, I wanted you to have the charts. So where did I get these numbers? Where did I get the different variables that I used? You're not going to be able to read these, but I wanted them to be part of the disc that you picked up, because it shows you the numbers that I chose and how to justify the numbers. All of it is in the disc. You'll see it when you read that. This one page is public school-aged children generated from select transit-oriented developments in New Jersey. There was a study done. They went to these 10 different developments. The total number of units in these all 10 of these developments was 2,183. If you use the variables that I told you, what they came out with was there's 47 kids generated from those units, which is substantially less than what I projected. However, I did not want to use these numbers. I went back and I used the heavier numbers for the township, which projects 20 kids. These are just more charts to support the argument. This one here, they did a sample New Jersey transit-oriented developments. Larger multifamily units, 5+, they were for rent, which gives you a higher number, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. Total projected, total number of units was 2,183. Based on the variables that I'm using, this should have produced 285 public school-aged children, and it produced 47. It's substantially less. I'm not an architect. These gentlemen over here will go into it a lot better than I could, but these type of developments are being designed architecturally to, I don't want to say prevent school-aged children, but they're designed in such a fashion that they're marketed for not raising children in these type of developments. You can't put a sign up there and say you're not allowed to have any kids living in here. However, if you have a one-bedroom unit, we have 51 bedroom units, they're simply not going to generate public school-aged children, or at least not a substantial amount. And the pilot and municipal revenue. Can I just grab some water? Thank you. Option 1. You have a handout tonight. These numbers are in your handout. They're no different. I just wanted to briefly go over them. We gave you an option 1 of keeping everything on the existing municipal complex. And we provided a range of $311.93 to $266 increase in taxes on the average residential assessment. Your handout shows, this is from last week and bridging over to this week, option 2, where we do the swap and relocate over to Hamilton Avenue and Snyder Avenue, the numbers come out to $246 to $280 increase. The third option is option 2 with pilot. Estimated tax increase drops down to $211 to $246 with the pilot. Yes, I'm going to right now. And I'm going to walk you through a sample pilot, but just like I said before when I went through that site plan, it's very conceptual. It's not set in stone. The pilot's even more so. I mean, we're really doing a lot of projecting out here because the pilot is based on a plan. We don't have a plan. I had to create a plan. I had to create a plan with a certain type of density in order to create a pilot. So a lot of this is, just keep in mind, we're projecting out quite a bit. What is a pilot? A pilot must have a specific public purpose for the township in order for the township to enter into a pilot. Inclusionary housing is a common one. Environmental cleanup is another. Last meeting, we talked about what happens with the environmental cleanup on the municipal complex. We know there's some type of cleanup. Okay. Sorry. What does this pilot stand for? Payment in lieu of taxes. Payment in lieu of taxes. And you can only adopt a pilot if there is a public purpose. And two, I just picked out two, environmental cleanup and inclusionary housing are public purposes on public lands. Standard property taxes versus the annual service charge. When you get into a pilot, it's called an annual service charge, ASG. The land itself is assessed and taxed at the standard property rate. That doesn't change. In a pilot, you break the property into two components. Land stays the same. Whatever it's assessed at, it gets taxed the same way, and everybody gets their taxes. County, school, library, township, based on the assessed value of the land. However, on the improvements, what's built on top of the land, and the utilities, all the improvements associated with the development are taxed differently. You enter, the township can receive up to 95% of the ASG, the annual service charge, and the county is required to get 5%. It used to be 0, but the counties got mad, and they went and they changed the rule, and they made sure that they got their 5%. The school district is not required to receive anything, although this can be negotiated, and it commonly is. It's usually negotiated based on the type of development, and you go back to the projections of school-age children. If a township comes up with a transit-oriented development and you're not going to generate any school-age children, well, that impacts this negotiation. The redevelopment plan would include a provision that a pilot may be considered by the township. And that's all it does. Redevelopment plan does not create a pilot. Even if the council adopted a redevelopment plan at the next hearing or at a public hearing and went through the whole ordinance process, that does not create a pilot. What the redevelopment plan will simply have a paragraph in there saying that the township governing body may wish to enter into a pilot with a redeveloper. That's it, one line. All right, and why can't you enter into it yet? Well, you need a redevelopment plan that's approved first. Then you need the environmental studies are completed, because all of this is going to come into play. Then you need a fiscal impact study, a fiscal impact analysis of the pilot versus a standard tax rate. And you want that provided by the developer. So he can show the township, CFO, and have everybody review it, what are the advantages? Does it make sense for the township to enter into a pilot? Also, you have the traffic impact analysis. If you go back to what I said in the beginning, a redevelopment law is different than a municipal land use law. Just say this type of development generated the need for a traffic signal at Park and Plainfield Avenues. The total cost for that could range somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. If you stick under the municipal land use law, you're only allowed to have that developer pay for his pro rata share for that traffic light. However, under a redevelopment plan, you can make that a requirement of the redevelopment plan that the developer does that traffic light and that he does the environmental studies and cleanup and basically any other reasonable improvement that's attached to a redevelopment plan. And finally, detailed site plans are submitted by the designated developer. And the reason for that is you need to understand the extent of the on-site and off-site improvements. Excuse me, the township cannot make any realistic determination whether or not we should decide to get into a pilot until we have all of this information so that we can evaluate it. Pilots are calculated one of two ways. The municipality may charge up to 2% of the total project cost. This is the one that I'm most familiar with, TPC. And the other one is a percentage of the project's annual gross revenue, which is AGR. The pilot must be phased into full taxation by the end of the abatement, which is somewhere between 10 and 30 years. Again, that's all negotiated. This slide is the same slide that you saw last week. If you look at the top portion of it down to here, if you remember, we took the 35 townhouses, 100 apartments, 13 affordables, came out to a value indicated assessed after the equalized ratio and so forth. The tax revenue was $833,733 anticipated for this project. Of that amount, the municipal revenue is 17.12%, or $142,000. The rest goes to the county, school district, and the library. Now, if we do the same sample redevelopment project and we add a pilot in here, what you have to do is you have to break the land up on the top here, assess the value of the land. I assigned a number of $3 million. That's only estimated land value after the adoption of the redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan creates density, use, all those other items that we talked about. Now the land has value. It's no longer public lands. So we assess this number to it. Using the tax rate, the tax revenue comes out to $115,000. Of that portion, the municipal portion of it is $19,743. We're only talking about land at this point in time. And then everybody, the county, school, library, gets their share. Plus, this is what a pilot is, for as clear as I can make it. Total estimated cost of the improvements, I came up with $16,790,000 TPC, total project cost. I have a slide, I'll go into that in more detail in 1 minute. You take your 2% annual service charge. Instead of a tax, you're getting an annual service charge. It's $335,800. The municipality can keep 95% of that, or $319,010. 5% has to go to the county, which is $16,000. So up here on the land, we got $19,743. Down here, we got $319. Our total would be approximately $338,753. Now, why would any developer enter into a pilot? If you remember from last week, let me see if I can get that slide. If we went straight taxes and we built this type of mixed housing development, what is the developer expected to pay on today's rate? $833,733. We get a little bit of that, $142,000. So the developer, that's the number that he sees. That's the only number that he cares about, right there. When you go to the pilot, what's the developer paying? Total developer's payment of taxes on land plus the total ASG, it drops down to $451. So you could see the developer wins here. The township wins here. And how do you get the developer to do things that he doesn't want to do? How much is he saving yearly on a pilot? Well, we don't let him walk away with that money. We then put that money into the project or other improvements. Traffic light, environmental cleanup, streetscape improvements, walkways to the train station, so on and so on. It's all negotiated. And this just summarizes the pilot. Total municipal estimated tax revenue with the pilot, it's estimated $338,000. Total municipal estimated tax revenue, standard municipal tax rate, $142,000. I just gave you, that's a very simplified approach. There's a lot of little nuances of it and so forth, but I just tried to give you a very simple example. Other considerations under a pilot, the assessed value of the improvements is not added to the municipal tax base. So that's a negative. New Jersey school aid formula is based on municipal ratable base. That's a small negative also. So that would have to be evaluated. The redevelopment law provides greater flexibility for township to require the developer to perform other improvements on site or related to the redevelopment plan. such as cleanup, environmental site remediation, traffic signals, streetscape improvements, and other negotiated improvements. Again, you can't really get into all of this until you have a plan in front of you and you have all the studies and so forth, because then you see what you want from the developer. And when I did that TPC, that total project cost, I went through the townhouses, square foot, I used $70 per square foot construction cost times 35. I used $70 per square foot cost for the apartments. Excuse me. Roads, driveways, utilities, parkings, lightings, we came up with a $3 million, so 16. Your pilot is all based on this number right here, total project costs. I just want to caution you, this number here it could go in a lot of different directions. I think it would go, well, if the density comes down, this number comes down, and the pilot comes down. I don't think the density should go up, so I won't go there. But this number right here is the critical number. I used reasonable numbers to develop that. However, I just want to be clear to everybody, this is just an exercise, and this would have to be evaluated in a lot more detail than I'm going through tonight should this go forward. But I wanted to get you close to the thinking. Project schedule and other considerations. Yes. Pilot can be done between 10 and 30 years, and it's gradually phased in. So just as the accountants last week provided those charts, I don't notice, but generally it's done on 5-year increments, and the rate would change over a period of 30 years.
If we were to pay for the whole project over 20 or 25 years, would we do a pilot over 20 or 25 years? Or some?
The pilot does not have to coincide with the bonding, okay? So the question was, how long would you do the pilot for? And my best answer that I can give you is I'm not sure. What have I done? Mostly 20-year pilots. The range is 10 to 30 years, and the ones I'm familiar with have generally always seemed to, and I can't give you the reason why, but they always seem to come out to around 20 years. But I can't give you more of a specific answer than that.
I realize we're not in the Q&A section yet, but it's one follow-up for that with regards to the pilot. Up here on the presentation, you talk about the standard tax methodology, and then separately you talk about how you would calculate that payment in lieu of taxes and the mathematics behind that. You also mentioned you have a 10 to 30-year window. This is sort of where that could be applied before it reverts back to a traditional or a standard tax relationship with the town. You also mentioned that there's a transition period. Is that, so we can understand the definition of the word transition, using your numbers, would it be $338,000 for 10 years and then it swaps over to a traditional, or does it phase out?
It phases in. It phases in over either 5-year increments, 5, 10, 15, 20, and each time the pilot becomes less and less and the municipal taxes starts to become more in effect 100%. So it phases in, generally speaking 5-year periods, 5-year increments.
So, this is what I understand. So theoretically, if it was a 10-year period, on year one it would be 100% pilot, 0% traditional, and then it would go down to 50-50, and then 0 and 100. It would sort of transition that way.
That's a fair way of saying it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
My last section is project schedule and other considerations. Where do we go from here? What's to happen after tonight? And what are some thoughts in the redevelopment plan? And some of these are repetitive, so I apologize for that. But the developer shall be responsible for all environmental cleanup to residential standards in accordance with the DEP Site Remediation Act. The developer shall take into consideration the location of those 2 buildings and structures that are already utilizing the Columbus Avenue and the Berkeley Avenue right away so that those single-family homes are not interrupted. Off-site improvements, we would have the developer provide streetscape improvements from Park Avenue to the train station. The streetscape improvements shall be in accordance with the Berkeley Heights Downtown Beautification Committee design standards. Other items that we commonly put in redevelopment plans, sustainability ordinances, green building design. I don't know if we're going to hold them to LEED standards on a residential, but it's something to think about. Building efficiency, having energy efficiency, township design standards of Chapter 19 would be enforced on this project. We would need a survey of the property and along with easements. The density is based on the number of acres. Technically, we don't even know how much land we have out there. We're using tax maps. We haven't done a detailed boundary survey. So why did I use 9 acres? I could have maybe used 8.5 acres and make it a little bit, it would go down a little bit. So we need a survey of the property. But all of these items in here, they're going to cost a lot of money to start doing all this work. I would prefer to have the redeveloper do this work and not the township. It gets very costly. We need the wetlands delineated. We need to submit for a letter of interpretation. We need to know what our transition area buffers are in the back of the property. The title binders will show if there's any easements, encroachments, et cetera, from NJ Transit or anywhere else. And then the sanitary sewer infrastructure will have to be studied, have to be monitored to make sure that there's available capacity, what type of upgrades would be required, if any, for this type of development at this density. Would lines have to be improved or reconstructed to a larger size? All of this gets into some pretty detailed engineering studies, and none of this work has been done yet, nor should it have been. NJ Transit regulations, we met with NJ Transit down in Newark. There's a design manual. Anytime you do any type of project along a railroad track, you have to worry about noise abatement. People come in, if this were to become a residential project, 2 weeks later they're calling and complaining about, hey, there's a train going by my house and it's loud. What can you do to help me? So we want that. We would require the developer, don't laugh, it's happened to me on a couple of projects. And so you put those design standards right into the redevelopment plan that the architects would have to design buildings that are soundproof, a certain type of windows and so forth, so it's quiet in the homes. Pedestrian connection to the train station. We would have the developer meet with NJ Transit. Right now, everybody's familiar with how the train stops and people just walk across the tracks and so forth, and I know it's working over the years and so forth, but that would not be allowed to continue. When you're going to do a new project, they're going to have to meet today's standards. And we want to put that cost not on the township, but we're going to put that cost on the developer to have a safe pedestrian crosswalk across the tracks, and that would be regulated by NJ Transit. And then finally, there's NJ Transit setbacks. How close can you get to the tracks? How close can a building or slope, grading, stormwater, et cetera, can get to their property? Steps to be taken by the township. We started the first meeting. We had a conversation about the MOU of Little Flower. If you remember, there's a long list of conditions, outs on both sides, a lot of work that has to get done. Same thing with the MOU with the library. There's a lot of work that has to get done. Those are just very preliminary agreements at this point. Steps to be taken by the township after, should those move forward. Architectural and engineering proposals. Who's going to design all this work? Feasibility and analysis of the conceptual drawings. At these hearings, we heard comments from seniors needing an area. We heard comments that there's parking too far from the front doors and so forth. I can go on and on. All of the comments that were raised at these meetings would be addressed in this area right here, and try and take the drawings that have been done and make them better, take in the public comments, and then you do what's called value engineering. How can we build this thing for a lot less money? There's a system that you go through. You take those plans and you start evaluating every step of the process, the type of building materials, and you're also balancing that at the same time by trying to be green, by trying to use green energy and and lead standards and so forth, but that's going to push you up. So there's always a tug of war of trying to find the right value engineering in a project. And then you have your final layout that we all agree on, and then they go out for bid. There's a set of bid documents, construction drawings, specifications, the public bid process, awarding of the contracts, and then the starting of construction. And that's all with the municipal improvements. On the redevelopment plan, you have this draft redevelopment plan that we're discussing tonight. Then it's reviewed by the planning board. We have a public hearing. Council's required to have a public hearing on this redevelopment plan. And then after that, they could adopt the redevelopment plan. After the redevelopment plan is adopted, we would go out for what's called an RFQ, request for qualifications. We would solicit developers, and as part of that RFQ process, they would submit the experience of the firm, list of projects that they have completed, resumes of main personnel, bonding, financial statements, and a comprehensive pro forma. Also with the RFQ, you have the RFP, request for proposals. We would advertise the redevelopment plan after it's adopted, and we would have developers put together a presentation, just as I'm doing with you tonight, detail the narrative of the proposed project. They would have charrettes of the project drawings. They would be required to submit a fiscal impact statement, estimated total project cost. We need these numbers to see if a pilot works or not. Community impact statement, demographics. We want to see how many school-age children their project, as they've designed it, would contribute. Traffic impact analysis, which would be reviewed by our traffic engineers. Environmental impact analysis, a site remediation of wetlands, commuter parking, and then a construction schedule and phasing. After they do all of this RFP and RFQ and the developers submit all these proposals, both provide that the township reserves the right to reject all of them if we don't like them. We can, that's the bottom line, we could throw them all out if we want to and start all over again. What generally happens is a committee is formed and we review the developer's proposals. Then we create a short list of the proposals. And generally, it's hard, I'll just make this up, but generally maybe you get like 6 or 7 responses that meet all of your requirements. And out of those 6 or 7, you do a short list of the top 1, 2, or 3 that we really like. And we ask them for more information or to refine their proposal. We send them back for a second round and have them come back and refine their proposal. And then the township would enter into a memorandum of agreement with the developer, and then we would start the process of the redevelopment agreement, the site plan approval in front of the planning board, adoption of resolution, developer's agreement, and then start construction. That's my presentation, and at this time, I'll open up the questions to Mayor and Council, then I'll open up the questions to anybody in the public, and then I want to just say that since tonight's our last meeting, we have our township CFO here, we have our architects here, we have our township attorney here, so if there's a comment or that you've thought about from a previous meeting that you want to raise or ask, we're going to try our best to answer that too. So your comments are not just directed at what you saw tonight, but we're going to try and open it up to any comments or thoughts or suggestions that you have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for members of the council?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Michael, you mentioned the walkways, which would be developed from the area of the condos and/or apartments or what have you, going to the train station. And you indicated that the current circumstance would be unacceptable. And I'm assuming you're talking about the fact that some individuals will walk across the train tracks there on the road, on the street. What do you foresee? How would that be changed so as to make it either safer and/or more attractive or what have you?
You know, when we started this project, I reached out to NJ Transit, and I told them they're very familiar with Berkeley Heights and the crossing and so forth, and they sent me a manual. It must be several inches thick, And buried inside of there are pedestrian railroad crossing design guidelines and regulations. I have not read it yet. I'm a little bit familiar with it, but it's, you know, a lot of times things exist like this walkway, the way people walk across the tracks, and they just jump across in between the bar that goes down and so forth. They're going to want to make sure that we have a much more safe and effective pedestrian walkway, the width of it, the lighting, the stop bars, even the signal, the bar that goes up and down if we generate enough traffic. If we're telling people, yeah, we're going to put our commuter parking over in here and we want you to go from point A to point B, we have to be very careful how we do that. I know it exists today, but a lot of times, you know, things continue over time. But when you do a new project, it's a lot more stringent.
Are there state funds available either through the transit or through the Development Authority? Are there funds that be allocated to them?
NJ Transit doesn't give out money. They don't loan any money. What NJ Transit does, NJ Transit loves this project, but we have to be careful about whether or not we want to turn this project into a commuter parking / residential use, or, you know, at what level do we want to get them involved? I bring that up because when we met with them, they're aware of our waiting list and the number of parking. However, if we start putting a structured parking deck over on this property and we're inviting that many cars over here, we have to be very, very careful about that. Our local roadway networks, can they handle it? I think if you read our traffic impact analysis, the answer is going to be no. So I know we have a long waiting list, but I don't believe this is the site to solve that issue or solve that problem. We should respect the number of spaces that we already have, but if we substantially increase it, we're gonna further hurt that intersection of Plainfield and Park. That's my thought process on it. Now, NJ Transit did tell us that if the town and the community went for the structured parking and we started, I'm talking several hundred spaces, not 70. 70 I envision as being a surface parking lot that's a shared parking lot with the residential uses. That's my thought process. If we went to several hundred spaces, then you go into a deck. If you go into a deck, you get into a cost of between $12,000 and $15,000 to construct each space. If you get into those type of numbers, all of a sudden, the whole formula doesn't work anymore, and the developer is going to say, listen, I'll give you 250 spaces, but if I go down to Trenton, you go down to an Economic Development Authority, they will turn around and work out an agreement with the developer and help pay for the cost and so forth. But all of a sudden, I don't know what you pay on a monthly basis right now for a parking space, but you have to anticipate that number is going to be substantially higher because it's going to be funded through the cost increase on that deck. So at the end of the day, my feeling is that we have the 70 parking spaces. Our local roads can handle that using the shared parking with the residential uses, and that's where we should cap this and limit this. If it gets anything above that, we get into structured parking, the costs go through the roof, and the traffic becomes much too heavy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
You went over the pilot. You went over the pilot because that's going to reduce the annual estimated tax increase on the average residential home over not doing it, correct?
I'm sorry?
You mentioned the pilot because it would reduce the annual estimated tax increase on the average residential home, correct?
Correct. I mentioned a pilot because 95% of the redevelopment plans today in this type of situation have pilots. Developers, if you saw the tax implications, the township makes more money and the developer spends less money and we get more out of the developer. So it's a win-win. These pilots are put in there in order to help the process along because we're trying to get out of the municipal land use law and into the redevelopment law, which allows us more flexibility because we want more improvements out of the developer and we want to reduce the tax burden on the residents at the same time.
Right, and with option one, where we have it from 267 to 312 on the average home, a pilot for 20 years, based on the numbers that you projected, could reduce that number by what?
There's
Can't have a pilot on
I'm
under
sorry,
option one.
option two.
I should have made that clear, I'm sorry. It's a
Sorry,
it's actually a very good point. Obviously, we can't have a pilot under option one because we would not have a redevelopment plan. So I should have made that clear, sorry.
So under number 2, what do we reduce the taxes by?
Under option two,
211 to 246.
it drops it, approximately $36 in cost, from 211 to 246 with the pilot, to 247 to 280 without the pilot is the range right now. The numbers that I'm referring to are in your handout. Option 2, it's right at the bottom of the page, so everybody can have that handout tonight. You can see the numbers that I'm talking about.
Mike, can I ask a question about the pilot?
Sure.
It's a payment in lieu of taxes that you're saying is phased in 10 to 30 years. So if I'm building townhomes, is the resident then paying that pilot instead of a tax over the next 30 years? Because it's not the developer that owns it anymore. I'm confused as to how this concept works. Maybe Mike, no, you don't have it.
No? Answer that one?
Yeah.
I can answer that question. It's actually the phasing, the phasing kicks in, that's when it transfers over to the resident. So why it is usually phased in, and often a 5-year phase, is after 5 years, so many units are built, so many units are sold, and now people are living in those units. So after the 5 years, those individuals now take over the payment of taxes, and the developer now just pays the pilot.
So
but
basically
there may be an overlapping period where you'll have some people living in there not paying taxes because it's being paid through the pilot until that phase kicks in.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the members of the council?
I have a lot, sorry.
I just want to give everyone else a chance first. I guess my first question is, you had said that there's 135 units of regular housing and then 13 units of COA. I was always under the impression that the COA units get put on top of whatever development. Like, let's say if it's, you want to do housing 15 units per acre. I thought the COA wasn't counted in those 15, you actually add them on top. So it'd be, say, 1.5 per acre.
I think that's what I did. I did 15 units an acre, which comes out to 135. And then we went 10% on top of that, which comes out to the 13, which brings us to 148.
So we end up with a higher density than 15 per acre.
Correct.
then.
It works out to 16 point something.
The next question is, I don't know if you're still getting to more stuff, but was there any since you talked about that you only wanted 70 parking spaces for the train, which is what we have, which I guess I kind of bothered that we have the same amount, but you said that more than that would cause traffic. What is the traffic issues adding 135 plus the 13, whatever is 140 something units to Park Avenue?
In the binder that you have, there's a traffic impact study of all 3 of the properties, Snyder Avenue, Hamilton Avenue, as well as Park Avenue. And at the end of the day, this type of development, what happens at that intersection of Park Avenue and Plainfield Avenue? I had one question for the traffic engineers. Does it put us at a light? And he says, you're right on, he goes, you're right on it. He goes, it could go either way. You're literally, the numbers show you right on it. Right now, you'll see level of service D is what it operates at. Today, level of service D. With this development, she goes to level of service E. It does drop down 1 level. But the chip generator, they will not make a commitment of saying that we have to put in a light unless a more detailed study is done at that intersection. Although you have to do a lot of counts and so forth. It's a pretty heavy-duty study. I know the cost is between $300,000 to $400,000 for a light there, and what we can do in order to protect the township and the traffic is make it a requirement of the redevelopment plan to not only improve that intersection, but any other intersection that falls down in a level of service based on the traffic.
I mean, again, I guess, since you kept talking, saying this, and it's in one of my questions, everything kept basically being put on the developer. The developer has to clean up the property, the developer has to provide space, the developer has to provide a traffic light, all that. It's not like the developer is going to shell out more. He's just going to pay less for the property. It's going to lower the value of the property, so we still
But that's why
indirectly are paying for it.
If you go back, I can go back to that slide, and that's why the pilots are so commonly used now, because you get into these situations, almost, what property in New Jersey is not contaminated? What property in New Jersey can handle any type of reasonable residential development or commercial development and not create more traffic problems, and that require hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of improvements? Almost every one. I mean, we're a developed neighborhood. It's not just Berkeley Heights. Every place a ShopRite goes in or a shopping center or so forth, it blows out the traffic and so forth. But what the pilot does is take a step back. The redevelopment law takes the township out of the municipal land use law, where we're regulated very carefully based on pro rata share. The developer could turn around and say, well, I've added 100 trips to that intersection, but there's 2,000 trips there right now, so I only pay my whatever my share of that light is. The redevelopment plan allows us to put more on the developer. Now, why would he choose to do that? If we don't do the pilot and we just do the standard tax rate, you saw that he was going to be paying, if memory serves me, I think it was $833,000 a year. Through the pilot, he is saving, I think his number was $460,000 or something like.
About 40, 45%.
Yeah, there's a substantial savings to the developer. Now, what does he do with that money? We don't let him just take it and put it in his pocket and go home. We want a part of it to help our community, and he's going to keep a part of it to make his project successful. We want him to be, we want it to be a successful development too. You're right, you don't want to put too much on him, but that's why you can't get into the detailed discussions of a pilot, and I've gone very far tonight, but I got to take a step back. Until you have all that information, traffic impact analysis, environmental impact analysis, an LSRP and a site remediation, I can go on and on and on. We could talk about sewers for hours. Until we understand the full impact of the development, then you have the documents that you need to start that negotiation on and ask the developer to contribute. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess no matter how I look at it, it's going to lower the value of the land if the developer has to pay for X, Y, and Z, because he has to shell out more money. It's common sense that the value of the property has to go down.
Think of it this way. Forget the pilot, forget the redevelopment plan. We just go with a standard rezoning. Whatever type of rezoning we want, we put on this project, all right? The developer comes in and he's going to generate traffic, there's going to be environmental cleanup, but we don't have the opportunity or the leverage to go and negotiate with him to have him do those items. He's just going to do what his pro rata share, the minimum amount required by law. And he's going to pay if we do a mixed-use residential development, approximately $830,000 in taxes a year. Under a pilot, if he's paying $400,000, there's substantial savings to the developer.
I understand all that, but it's still, if I was buying a car with a dent in it, I'm going to pay less for the car because it has a dent in it because I have to pay to fix the dent. It's the same principle, but I'd rather move on to another question.
If I could,
Sure.
just from your question, using the car with the dent analogy, if I have one buyer for the car, it's worth X. If I have 5 or 6 buyers for the car, it's obviously worth more than X. So, Michael, have you considered, and I know you said there have been various developers who have been involved, or at least reached out. What is your experience with respect to, obviously, the greater number of individuals who are interested in a property? What can that normally be associated with insofar as the value of the property is enhanced?
Listen, there's no hiding the fact that developers, big-time developers throughout New Jersey are salivating to get on this property. Where does a property, 9.5 acres, across the street from a train station in downtown Berkeley Heights, when does that property like that become available? It doesn't. This is a very unique situation, and my recommendation, and that's why I spent time going through that RFQ and RFP process, we want to, it's in our best interest to create a competition here. Get it out there to the best and the brightest design teams and developers and have a competition. Have them come in here and wow you. I mean, let's see what they can come up with. The plan that I put up there, I mean, these guys they're a lot more talented than I am, and they're going to come up with different type of proposals and fiscal impact studies and traffic studies and so forth, and the governing body is going to be able to sit there and pick and choose and create a competition. With that, you're going to increase the value.
I frankly find the car example odd. So I'd like to pose it a different way. Because I don't think the property has a dent in it, all right? Does a pilot, the existence of a pilot, does it impact the appraised value of a property?
No, what impacts the appraised value of the property is a redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan creates the density, the use, the setbacks, and everything that's going to go on there, and that is going to create the appraised value of the land. The pilot is split into two parts. The appraised value of the land would just be how it would be appraised under standard municipal taxes, okay? And for the period of the pilot, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever it becomes, you base it on the construction cost, total project cost of that development, but then it eventually, as Joe said, that it eventually phases into your normal tax rate. So no.
The market value, the attractiveness, the demand for, the appraised value, all the value assessment of this property is not really connected necessarily
to the pilot. It's
versus-
all connected to the
separate
redevelopment
concept.
plan.
Understood. Just to clarify that. So I don't really see the connection of that example. It's also safe to assume that I'm not defending the developer, but I'm sort of talking about the pilot versus the traditional tax concept. The fact that they're paying a lower effective tax bill every year, it's not a tax bill, it's whatever terminology you use, but it's the equivalent of paying a tax. The
It's
fact
known
that
as a
that's lower
contract.
does not necessarily represent the full financial commitment that the developer is involving themselves in or committing themselves to, because it's other in-kind benefit and or improvement.
Sure.
So as opposed to the township receiving cash and then making the improvements, we are making this a requirement that they make these modifications, enhancements, which in fact cost money.
Absolutely. The
Right,
environmental
so-
cleanup alone could be several, I mean, we projected a number of 575 or 600,000 in our cost estimates. You know, it could easily be double that. And the township's on the hook for that. I mean, it's a township land. The township's responsible for cleaning up that property, you know, today. Whether or not we're doing it's a different issue, but we're responsible for cleaning that up. The pilot provides a mechanism for the developer to say, all right, I'll do it, but you got to help me out too, and I'm going to take on this cost. Same with the traffic signal or pedestrian
Yeah, I mean,
crosswalks.
so it's sort of a balancing act. The
Sure.
town says we can either receive a higher gross tax from you, and we paid the bill to make these modifications, and/or we'll take a smaller cash balance from you and have you do the work. It's sort of a balancing act as to what's more economically defendable for the township and the developer, and that's sort of the nature of the negotiation that takes place.
Number one, the township will receive more revenue every year. Number two, what you're not seeing on any slide is all of these costs that I've thrown out there. It could be several hundred thousands of dollars that we would also place on the developer.
Mr. DeLeo, do you have any more comments?
Yes, several more. There was the picture of the demographics about where you came up with the number for the amount of kids in the school. I don't know
Yes.
if you could put that
Just give me a minute.
slide back up. There was a number 5 on the top left corner.
I don't know how else to do this except for go back one at
It
a
was,
time,
it was
so.
way on into the beginning and had all the names of the towns.
Yeah, but using this mouse, I'm not sure. Just give me a minute. Oops. Let me go back to the beginning.
Yeah, well, that was the one. Just passed it.
I passed it?
Yes. That one. No, that
What?
was.
Do you want this one?
Yeah, that's the one where,
Yeah.
you know, they're all cities, like all West New York, all that is New Brunswick. They're all large cities, and they would have a different demographics than Berkeley Heights. I think the number one reason that residents come to Berkeley Heights is the school system.
Mhm.
And that's, as far as I'm concerned, hands down, there's no disputing that. And all those places are large cities that would be less likely to have kids where, I don't know about anyone else in this audience, but I can't believe that 20 school kids for 148 housing units, that just sounds impossible. And I don't think it's ever going to work that way. I'd say it can't.
Okay.
Um,
I did not use these variables. I didn't use the transit-oriented development numbers. I actually skipped over those because they're way too conservative. So I just used the standard public school age demographic numbers that they give in the beginning. There are two sets of numbers that they give you when if you're going to try and calculate school age children: regular single-family home, detached, townhouse, apartment. And then they give you another set of variables if you're going to build a transit-oriented development. I did not use those. I stuck with the first set.
Well, regardless, I'm just shocked that 20 kids for 148 housing units just sounds crazy. But going with that, if we even figured at 20 kids for all those units, that would be at $15,000 a year per kid. That's $300,000. And if, by the time we're done with the pilot program, which is with the school would be getting about $500,000 for those kids, that's cutting it way too close as far as I'm concerned. And on that basis, if we're doing a pilot program, I hate to say it any other way, but it sounds like the school is getting screwed out of $15,000 per kid for the house to send them to school. So it's gonna affect the entire school system if everyone else in town has to pay for all the kids that are going to school in this development. Is that plausible?
Again, I'll go back to that slide too. What the pilot does is it leaves that number up to negotiation, and that's up to how the township sees fit to split that 95%.
Yeah, because I can't see the school being thrilled with losing out and for the rest of the residents having to pay for all of these kids to go to school. But I'm going to move on to another question. When you talked about the units that aren't on Park Avenue, they'd be 3.5-story, which is technically 4 stories. I'm going to stick up for all the residents that live in any of those houses. I don't think I would want to have a building 4 stories high looking down into my backyard every day, because all the houses on Park Avenue are already established, and right now they have some type of buffer zone, and the way this is planned, they would be 4-story units where people can look right into their backyards, and I don't think that sounds practical or good for our township either. And I know you said that, you wanted it originally, that they were going to start small and go bigger to the back, but if it starts off right at the residential units, residential housing that we have existing, and we go right to 4 stories, that does not sound good for the people.
Mr. D'Elia, the plan that I saw was 2.5 stories on Park Avenue. I didn't see any 4 stories. The 4 stories were supposed to be in the back.
They're going to be right behind the Park Avenue houses.
Oh,
All the houses that are on Park Avenue.
Or 2.5 stories.
They're 2.5
Well,
stories.
there's
30
ranches and a lot of, there's several ranches along that area, so.
Okay.
Everything along Park Avenue is 2.5 stories. 36 feet building height.
But behind
Behind
those,
it, it was 3.5 stories.
and again, I don't
Okay.
want to have you go back to the pictures, but another question is, with all this housing, and I'm going to include, this is 148 units. The development that's proposed for Kings is another 160 units. If you do a redevelopment plan, there'll be more than the 160 units there. There's 100 units on Locust Drive where Dun and Bradstreet was. With all these developments, what if we have to expand the sewer plant and we just used up all the property for putting the DPW there? Then what do we do?
Again, I just asked a couple simple questions at the people at the sewer plant as far as capacity. I have not done any detailed sewer analysis or capacity analysis of this development and adding the other two that you mentioned.
I guess the last question I'm going to go with is, where the parking lots were, where there's 2 commuter parking lots in this, the one is similar to the spot where we have a commuter parking spot area now, and the commuters won't use it. So I can't see why they would want to use that, and that's the biggest one. But I also have a big problem with using the parking lot for 2 basic purposes, one for commuter, one for the residents, because what if the people that are residents don't get out of the way in time for the commuters? They're out of luck now.
The residential site improvement standards, which our ordinances are based on, include, and our parking design standards are based on the same exact information. They include a half a space for visitors per unit. And when you do the calculations, it comes out to 74. If we just stick with residential site improvement standards, it provides for 74 visitor parking spaces for this type of development. That's before we add 70 commuter parking spaces. So there's really an overlap right there. So we could actually reduce the number of parking. I would not suggest that you stick to RSIS and have 70 spaces, because I think you end up with way too much parking on the site. The visitor parking is part of this calculation already. There will be an overlap, but you're right. There's going to be a certain percentage that are going to be used every day. So you'd have to find that balance of what's the right number to satisfy the RSIS, the visitors parking, and the commuters. But you would want to be as accurate as you can be, maybe even land bank some area so that you could find that right amount that serves the public, but we don't end up with a sea of parking.
I guess one last simple thing to look at it from a different perspective. I know you said going over the tracks for pedestrians would cost over $1 million. What about going under the tracks, like New Providence has?
I don't even want to take a guess. I'm a pedestrian tunnel.
Yeah, they have a little one at the New Providence train station.
No, I know what you're familiar. I'm familiar with it, but I don't want to. I'm not comfortable throwing out a number. It's just beyond me right now.
I mean, I don't know if it was a possibility. I'm just throwing it out there. That's all.
Sure.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the members of the council? All right, we'd like to open up for questions on the presentation from members of the public. We do have the clock set at 3.5 minutes per person, and
3.5, I thought it was 4.
it was going to be 3, but I feel magnanimous tonight.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Okay.
Art Scholl, 41 Shady Grove Lane, Berkeley Heights. I am confused a little bit, because the first night I stood in front of you and I asked the question, are we currently talking to any developers? And I was answered unequivocally, no, one word from you, Mr. Mayor. And tonight I hear, when we talk to developers. So are we or are we not talking to developers?
I've had.
You asked me a question, are we talking to developers?
Correct.
I don't know the collective we. I have not talked to any developers.
I.
Members of the council have not talked to any developers. We refer all developers to our plan, so we have not talked to any
Okay.
developers.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question. Have we done any studies on crime versus population density? In other words, we have numbers related to crime with increased population in a given area.
No, we have not.
Will these new houses cost us new police force, additional police force?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, shouldn't we know that answer?
That would be part of the community impact statement that would be required under RFQ, RFP process. The developers would be required to submit a fiscal impact statement, traffic impact statement, a community impact statement. The community impact statement would go into details on the burden that the development would place on the community, such as police, fire, schools, school-age children, and...
That all adds to the numbers, though. doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why you can't even have any serious discussions of pilots or redevelopment or anything like that until all of that work is done and evaluated. It has not been done for this port, at this point.
But the numbers we're given are, this is what you can expect as a tax increase. So
I had to, you know what, I came up with this. I mean, I just want to stress this. That plan that I went over tonight, that concept plan, I came up with that. I mean, that is a very, I have to start somewhere. In order to have a conversation, in order to even start this process, you have to start somewhere. There's nothing set in stone that says that this is going to be a residential development. However, I came up with that as a starting point to have the conversation, what if? As far as what if the number of people, traffic, what would it look like, the density, and then you have to figure out a budget and a pilot. So it's a starting point, and that's all it is.
okay, as part of option one, we have an item called the renovation of the DPW. Why is that necessary? Aren't renovations going on currently? I mean, they're putting in new garage doors, modifying things. We have to have a new DPW if we do option two because we're going to sell that property. But why is there a cost for renovation in option one? That never appeared anywhere, it just came up in that list.
Now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the option number one includes keeping some of the existing buildings and renovating them,
Yeah.
and then reconstructing other garages entirely. And that's based on this needs analysis that was done by the architects, saving some of the buildings and renovating them, and then reconstructing other ones.
We're doing that, but we're not getting a new library. I don't know how you suddenly brought that into that column in option one. So, all right, one more thing. What have we paid to date for the studies we've had for this plan? Does anybody know here? Does anybody control the purse strings?
Mike, do you have a ballpark figure?
If you don't, I do. I have a figure.
Okay, so why are you asking the question if you have the figure?
Because I want everyone to hear the figure.
Oh, okay. What's the figure?
$97,000.
$97,000, thereabouts. Thank you, Mr.
2
Chol.
weeks ago.
I don't know if that's true, but that's what Mr. Scholl said, so until we... Okay.
Okay.
Mike, do you have a number? I asked. Okay, we're close.
We're close enough, thank you.
John Bonacci, 156 Gallinson Drive in Murray Hill. Mayor, Bruno, and Council, I want to get some further response on my original question of 3 weeks ago, which you said was allowed, regarding staging or incrementing the infrastructure changes under discussion. But first, I want to congratulate all of you involved on a thorough and detailed project for the 3 discs I studied in detail and for tonight's. The only criticism I have heard is that there has not been enough public disclosure, considering that some work was done almost 2 years ago, and also that not enough has been said about the expenses already incurred, except just now. In any case, my management plan will be stated briefly using the information provided on the discs that I have reviewed. I believe we can reduce the total cost from the $25 million level to about $10 million over a staged 4-year period. And this would obviously reduce the tax impact by about 50% or more. Here's how I would do it. And I'll give a short write-up for the record in a minute. Step 1, do the swap, $2.8 million. Step 2, move the police station to the rectory, $1.7 million. Step 3, convert the Little Flower Auditorium to a meeting room / community center, 0.3 million. Step 4, rearrange offices in the existing town hall to use the freed up space from steps 2 and 3, which amount to about 10,000 square feet, 0.2 million. Step 5, rent the existing library from Little Flower and cross-rent some school area for CCD to Little Flower during the interim. So for the immediate 2-year period, the cost I see is about 5 million using your numbers. In the 3rd and 4th year, we can move the library to the 2nd floor of the Little Flower and complete a modern library and enhanced community center for an additional maximum of 5 million and a total cost over 4 years of about 10 million using the data provided on the CDs that I reviewed. This optimizing and prioritizing adds significant value to Berkeley Heights. I am sure this plan can be modified or altered further and like to hear your initial response to this kind of staging or incrementing.
Thank you.
Charlie Pratt, 45 Park Avenue. A couple questions have come to mind. When you were talking about a streetscape along Park Avenue, is that designated to be something to take place strictly in front of any new development or along that whole strip of Park Avenue where the development is behind? Does that disrupt any current property owner's property at all?
No, all the improvements would be within the public right-of-way, and I would recommend that it would wrap all the way down Park and then go up to Berkeley, and so that it just beautifies that portion of the neighborhood. And all of the improvements would strictly be within the public right-of-way.
Okay, now you have all of this flow. I mean, when you look at the diagram, everything, because you have tracks behind it, so everything has to pour out in one side. It all pours out into Park Avenue. Now, when you look at Park Avenue, I've been there 31 years. I know how that street works. I know who's on it, the demographics on it. There's ladies with strollers, there's young children, there's older people and stuff. Park Avenue is on an uphill slope. When you live up at the end of Park Avenue that's more affected by this property, you've got cars flying up this hill, and when you're backing out of your driveway, and that's what people do on Park Avenue, you back out of your driveway. You also cross a street to get a sidewalk because one side of Park Avenue has no sidewalks. So do you want these people to walk in the street? No, you do not. When you add an influx of cars, and you can't tell me, just because they're commuters, that these people don't have cars and that they're all going to commute. There's no contract that says you have to be sterile and take the train to get a unit. All of these cars, you're going to increase that traffic substantially, especially during rush hour. Now, you've got these problems that you're creating in an established neighborhood that already, it's like Frogger getting across that street sometimes without getting killed. Add some more traffic, add people trying to back out of their driveway, add the speed that's on that road, and then get the people that are going to say, I'm not even going to do this. I'm shooting down these two little side streets and ripping through these neighborhoods that these roads just can't handle. So I would really like you to really look at a traffic situation on Park Avenue because I think it's being overlooked. I really do. I think it's a lot worse than what you think. The setbacks on the projected houses that are there, are you going by a minimum setback, a 15-foot, whatever's there? Were you looking at basically trying to be a little bit more generous, get these things a little further away? Because my feeling is, and I'll let you answer this question, my feeling is we're kind of disguising this, calling it residential property, when a residential property in Berkeley Heights is a single-family home. It just is. It's not a tower. This is high-density housing any way you look at it. It's an apartment complex. When you looked at that building, there's nothing of a residential flavor there other than the fact that people are getting in out of the rain. These are towers. These are big. These are going to be looking down on anybody that's been there in this established neighborhood. And you put these stipulations in, but everybody knows that, you know, you want to get property up, you want to make a developer happy, you give them a little extra. So once this goes into place, when do the variances start? When do they want to move this closer and move that closer and do this and do that? Stuff that's not in the plan. So the vote has already taken place. There's no input from the public, and then all the variances and everything start. I mean, is there any control factor to that?
Okay. I'll answer the variance question first and then setbacks. What's unique about a redevelopment plan is it does not provide for variances. All right? There's language put in there that the developer is not, the planning board cannot grant variances on this project. That's why you go through this whole process. If the developer wanted to add a story, if the developer wanted to move a building closer and so forth, he's got to go back to the governing body, request an amended redevelopment plan. It has to be studied. You have to have a public hearing. Then that study then has to go back to the planning board for review and comment. Then it's got to go back to council, and you would have to adopt it at just as you would an ordinance and a public hearing. A redevelopment plan does not provide for that type of leeway. I know right now you can submit a site plan application, go in front of the planning board and ask for 15 variances and argue each one of them. You can't do that with a redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan is customized to that project. You listen to all of the points, and you set the building height, you set the setback, and it is what it is. That's it. All right, with respect with setbacks, I don't know, I haven't taken it to that type of detail to start saying it's going to be 20 feet or 15 feet or something like that. So I don't have a good answer for you. My thought process would be maintain 2.5 stories along Park Avenue, all right? So you keep the building height down to 36 feet. Right now you're permitted 30 feet right next to us in the R10 and R15 zones. So instead of 30, I would permit 36. Why? Because I like the roofs that are pitched higher, and that would provide for it. We can lower it down to 30, but I think you're going to have a lot of ugly roofs. I really like those steep roofs, and that's what our design standards call for, a certain type of steep pitched roof. Just has has a nicer look to it. But it's 2.5 stories along Park Avenue, and that's it. I don't have a setback for you. My thought process would be to maintain the prevailing, you have those 5 houses. I don't know what the prevailing setback is right now along Park Avenue, but you would want to maintain that.
And, it's just we talk about the 2.5 stories right on Park Avenue. It's the ones, too, that really, I mean, this is a disruption in the neighborhood where there is a degree of privacy. It doesn't matter how busy you think that area is, there's a degree of privacy. But when you put 3.5 stories, 25, 30, 40 feet behind somebody's property line, you need one hell of a tree to hide that. And, I mean, no matter how you look at it, you're under a microscope. So, I would just like people to look at, and I don't know who's going to get the vote on this. I don't know if the public's going to get a vote. I don't know if it's just the council or whatever. But all I could ask is, seriously, in all good conscience, if you're going to vote yes, vote no, whatever, would you want this thing in your backyard?
Stephen Yellen, 130 Dogwood Lane. A couple of my questions were already asked to Mr. D'Elia, which I commend him for. The first question I have for Mr. Mistretta was in terms of the amount of parking that would have been made available. I want to make clarification on that. You spoke about having 70, where we have 70 commuter parking spots right now, and that would be maintained. In your presentation, you spoke about having that area for commuter parking in the same lot as residents who would be living in this new residential complex. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes.
So how would you delineate between parking spaces for commuters versus parking spaces for residential areas, and how would you be able to enforce that?
Because what I'm looking to do is create, again, the plan that you saw is just a very rough idea. But the idea is our township ordinance and the residential site improvement standards ordinances requires a half a space per residential unit to be set aside for visitor parking, overflow parking, extra, over and above what they need for their unit. So When you do the math, that comes out to 74 parking spaces. And we need about 70 parking spaces for the commuters. What I like to do and suggest is that we combine the two and do a shared parking approach, so we don't have over an abundance of parking out there. So my point being is use the visitor parking that the units generate as your commuter parking.
And what would stop more visitors than the 74 from going into that lot and just parking in places where commuters would normally park?
I guess that's the same thing that happens out there today. I mean, the town has a system for regulating that, and it would be regulated the same way. I mean, right now we have how many parking spaces that are vacant, all those back lots? It's the same idea.
I think the list of people who are commuting who'd like to have those parking spots is considerably greater than the number of vacant ones that are a long walk away, but that's just my personal opinion. The other question I had, in terms of, this was actually a follow-up to what Mr. D'Elia asked. In the presentation, you spoke about there be 51 or so of the 148 housing units that would be only one bed.
I went with 50-50. I went with 51s, 52s, because that's,
Out of the 148.
yeah, broke off the townhouse separately because I don't think we should have an entire condo or apartment complex, all right? So I have, and keeping the lower density, lower height building up front where you see it from Park and Plainfield being the townhouses, and putting the apartments in the back. So in the back I had 100 units, 51s and 52s.
All right, so in other words, for those other 50, or, you know, the other 50, those would be at least 2-bed units, is that correct?
The 51 unit bedroom, 1 bedroom and 52 bedrooms.
Townhouses.
Oh, the townhouses? I'm sorry, we used the 2-bedroom townhouse, multiplier. It actually falls under the 2 to 3, it's the same number.
So my point is it plausible for those units, you could have maybe 1 child, 2 children in those individual units?
Yes,
My point is, if that were the case, then the probability would indicate you'd have more than 20 students in that whole complex, in theory.
Again, I'm basing it on the demographic multipliers that I have.
I understand that. I'm not suggesting the data is wrong, it's just my observation. Let me just add then as a final comment. I ran against you, Mr. D'Elia, last year for council. I disagreed with you strongly on some things, I still do. But in this matter, you and I are in agreement. And I think that if any member of this governing body in future were to vote for a plan of this kind for that part of downtown, I can't imagine any of you winning re-election. And I would urge you to consider that.
Mr. Sincaglia?
Yes, Johnson Caglia, 22 Robbins Avenue. Charlie Pratt indicated correctly that most, residents in Berkeley Heights are single-family. However, we've got the Daisy Lane section, we've got Sherman Avenue and the apartment by Kings, we've got Berkeley Square, we've got Berkeley Meadows, we've got Spring Home Drive, we've got Cottage Street. We've got quite a few residential things that are not single-family homes. What I'm asking is, with respect to the number of kids that we might anticipate, did you analyze those kind of properties in terms of the number of kids that are coming from them right now? Because this is similar type of housing. I think that would, in other words, some of these towns here may not be, compatible with Berkeley Heights. But we've got some experience of that kind of housing already. So what I'm asking is, was that done? And if not, I think it should be done. So
It wasn't done. It can be done, but you have to be careful looking at the bedroom sizes. So what's being done with these type of developments is architecturally design the units to function a certain way. If you can't have if the second bedroom is so small that it doesn't make sense, or if you have one large bedroom and so forth, if you get into looking at you could do the comparison, but you have to look at the size of the rooms also. That's my point.
well, I would think that that information is there, and you could certainly get from the school district the number of kids that are coming from there, from the one-bedroom units, from the two-bedroom units, from the townhouses, to give us, I think, a better picture. Because I'm not sure what the numbers are. I mean, you know, your numbers might be right, they may be way off, I don't know. But I'm just thinking that there's housing in the town already that I think would make a fairer comparison, because they're the kind of people that moved here and are attracted here but would probably also be the same kind that would be attracted here at the new development.
It's a good point.
Okay. My second question is, in comparing options 1 and 2, the cost difference is about $3 or $4 million. And one of that is offset in option 2 by the proceeds from the sale, which is about $3.8 million. I guess my question is that $3.8 million based on the development, the way you projected it here with this number of units? And if you lowered the number, what would be the drop-off in what that sale might be? Because I guess what I'm getting at is, I don't know, again, the school thing isn't the only consideration, traffic and everything else, and also what we might get in taxes. But if it was less dense, and instead of 3.8 million, we got 3.2 million, that's, to me, over a 20, 30-year period, not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. But what would be the implications of lowering the density?
To answer your question, that 3.8 million was derived based on a multiplier of exactly based on the density of that plan, all right? Based on the amount of apartments and amount of townhouses. If memory serves me, it was based on $22,500 per apartment. I took an average. That general rule of thumb is $20,000 to $25,000, so we went with $22,500. And then with townhouses, I believe it was between $40,000 and $45,000, so we took the average of $42,500. And if you do the math based on 35 times 42,500, and then 100 times 22,500, and then we used a smaller number for the COA units, and that works out to the 3.83. So to answer your question, yes, it's directly related. A developer is generally going to pay you based on density, how many units, and there's a very simple formula. There's a lot of other issues that come involved, but yes.
Well, one of the things I think the council...
Mr. Sincaglia, your time is up. Thank you. Mrs. Illis?
Hi, Margaret Illis, Twin Falls Road, Berkeley Heights. So what I'm trying to understand is how this high-density housing proposal fits within a total plan for Berkeley Heights. Because when I bought my house here 25 years ago, we didn't do high-density housing. And I do remember clearly a number of years ago on the council that Mr. Perrone was working on a master plan for Berkeley Heights that covered what our vision for Berkeley Heights was. I'm afraid that with the growth of my children, I lost track of what happened to that master plan. We're talking about 148 units here, 160 units at King's. I just heard for the first time there's another 100 units proposed on Locust Drive. The old D&B site, or discussed. There's also the Berkeley Florist site, which, rumors around town are that the developer that bought the Berkeley Florist site on Springfield Avenue is also looking at residential units. So if you took all of those units that everybody's talking about over 10 years, how many kids does that put in the schools? And where's the school construction? We're already tight on classroom space, and that's before we add more kids. So I was going to suggest exactly the same thing that Mr. Sintaglia did. Have we looked at the existing townhomes that we've already put into Berkeley Heights, and how many kids are there? Down on Glenside, that development, I was there for that approval process, and we were told there wouldn't be kids in those townhouses because they were small units. The bedrooms were too small for children. You know what? It's a school bus stop today. So people come to Berkeley Heights for our schools. And people like me on the, Park Avenue is going to be the next one. We suffer through the traffic. Joe, you know this. You know where I live. You can't get in and out of my house most days because of the traffic going down Diamond Hill. So those commuters, the commuters that are being sold in these transit developments, they're going to Princeton. They're going where the corporate sites are being developed. Corporate sites aren't being developed in Manhattan right now. They're being developed in alternate locations. So those people are going to park their cars by the train station because that's where they live, and then they're going to get in those cars and they're going to drive to work. They're going to drive south and they're going to drive west. And that's right through our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Denise Syracusa, Scotch Plains. I'm a former resident. So back in the day, I used to take the Erie Lackawanna, and I remember moms and dads, husbands and wives, all waiting in their cars because they didn't get one of those parking spots for those commuters coming off the trains. So have any of you ever thought about moving the train station? Have you talked to New Jersey Transit about that? And what's that
Yes.
conversation been like?
New Jersey Transit refused to move it. We looked at a site off of Snyder Avenue where
fields
Snyder
are?
Avenue Park is, and New Jersey Transit didn't want to entertain the idea of moving it.
How about behind, like, the shopping centers?
We don't own that land, and where you put a train station is up to New Jersey Transit. We have asked for alternative sites, but they said we have an existing train station, and they're not willing to move it right at this point. We asked about a few years ago. I mean, I may say a few years ago. It was in the last 3 or 4 years.
So our
But
the
it's-
traffic problem will never go away.
Could be right.
Just a point of clarification, I want to make sure I understood. You mentioned a number of studies, like the community impact study. I believe there were a number of them that have not been done yet and would need to be done. Correct?
Correct.
And I think I also heard you mention that those studies are pretty expensive. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And that, now this is the point where I'm not sure. I want to make sure I understood you correctly. Those studies wouldn't be undertaken because of their expense unless it was this already had been decided to go forward with this project. Correct?
Well, there's not a redevelopment plan yet.
But I mean, you wouldn't I want to make sure I understood you, and maybe I misunderstood you. It sounded like you said that, I seem to recall hearing you say that because of the cost of the studies, they wouldn't be undertaken unless there was a decision had been made to go forward.
It's not necessarily the cost, it's the process. We're not there yet. The township had to do a certain amount of work just to have this conversation that we've had over the last 4 meetings. And we're very cognizant of the cost and the fees and the professionals that need to be hired and so forth. So we're kind of in a situation where we had to roll this out and present it to the public and get feedback. And in order to do that, you have to do a certain amount of work, and there's a lot of estimates involved. Should the plan move forward, then before you get into redevelopment plans and pilots and everything that we talked about tonight, there would have to be a lot of studies in order to support that project. That work has not been done yet. That work would generally be paid by the developer for his project that he wanted to go forward
Okay, so I mean,
with.
I did hear you correctly then. I mean, a decision to move forward would have to be made before you go forward with those studies.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, the results of those studies could end up in indicating that a greater amount of increase of taxes is necessary if there's added police force needed or added sewers or whatever the results, it's theoretically possible that it could mean a greater tax bill than what you're currently projecting. But nobody here would know that until it was too late. I mean, at that point, it's a fait accompli. You're moving forward with the project at that point.
I would say not necessarily. If you look at the RFQ...
You would stop the project at that point?
No. if you remember one slide that I showed you is, do that, we can't give you, we don't have that data until the studies are done, until you do this RFQ, RFP process. The township retains the right to reject all of them. Okay, so.
But if you undertake the studies and then you decide not to go forward with the plan, now you're on the hook for the cost, right? I mean, the developer's not going to pay for
The
something.
developer pays for those.
Even if you decide to reject the plan?
Correct. What the township would pay for is for their professionals to review all of that work and make make recommendations to the governing body.
We don't pay for the RFP or the RFQ process.
The developer
That is paid for by
funds-
the various developers that would be doing the bids. Part of their process is they're going to have to do their own homework to put that complete RFP and RFQ together. And when they're all said and done, let's say we had 8 of them that came in, and all of them ended up being something that would cause too much burden on the taxpayers, the council could reject all of it and start over. So there is a right of refusal. And that being said, this is just, Mike needed to do something to give us numbers to put a presentation together. This is the first thing we've looked at, and nothing says that this is going to be necessarily a residential property. It's just one idea of what could go on this property. And we are no way set with the decision. This is the first time the council's seen it. And this is an option, and there's more options to be explored.
I understand that a certain amount of work needed to be done to present some kind of estimates. I understand that. But you're asking folks here to either support or not support things, and they don't have all the facts. They don't have, especially in the case of taxes. So.
And we don't have all the facts yet because this is just a preliminary discussion of what we found. What we do know is that something has to be done with that site because the town hall that's in its present location is antiquated. You folks, if you look at town hall, if tomorrow night, if you come to the meeting, just do me one favor and look up and see how many sprinklers you have. Let me save you the time. None. We have no sprinklers in that system. Okay, that's why we're here. We can't have a crowd in there. We know we need to do something, and the some things we've come up with is rededicate ourselves to, and redevelop the property we're on. Okay, with no pilot, no taxes coming in, or do the swap. And we still have to address the library because the library, we own the library building as a township, and that's antiquated. So something has to be done. We've looked at it. We're trying to come up with an answer to do something. It may not be the right thing, but we're not even near the point of completion. We just did due diligence at the cost of $97,000 to make sure that we had, something to present to the public, and now we do. Once we get a lot closer, there'll be, we'll have more discussions, but you have to leave here with the fact that something has to be done with the complex because it's an 80-year-old building that needs to be raised, and again, there's cost to do that too. So that's where we are. We're doing our due diligence, and it doesn't cost nothing to do due diligence. It costs money. And we've hired architects, we've hired a lawyer. We want to make sure that we're doing things right and according to the law. So far, we're on target. So again, we were at the point to bring this to the public for a look-see of what we've done, and we've taken every consideration that you've given us, and we'll work on it. And we'll come back to you with modifications, but it's a work in progress. This is not a done deal by no way, shape, or form. Thank you. Mrs. Matula.
Okay.
Actually, if I could interject and add on to that.
Mr. Hall.
The intent of these hearings is actually to provide information and to set a framework for discussion. So there's no formal action plan being presented, and it's not intended to be that way. We, in fact, ourselves are listening to a lot of this information the first time tonight. So we have to think about this, digest this, along with the different questions and thoughts which are being presented by the community. We have to think about what are the issues in terms of the infrastructure downtown, the sewer system, the streets, the buildings. How do we address these things long term so we can understand the scope of this and all of this information, what are the implications for the township as it relates to people are talking about the police. I've taken an entire list of notes tonight. What does it mean for the school system? A lot of these questions are very, very relevant, and we haven't thought about it yet. This is not a formal presentation of an action plan. All this is an open dialogue of all the issues associated with something which was proposed to us by Little Flower. So we have to understand what is it, what is the concept, what is the framework, and how do we respond to that? In the next several weeks, the governing body individually and collectively will be required now to respond. We have to give individual opinions as to what we understand the issues to be, what are the priorities, what is the direction we want to take individually. Then we have to talk among ourselves to find out collectively what do we think is the best thing to do. At that stage, we will then start a dialogue directly, because we'll come up with a proposed action plan, and then we can start to critique the logic and the benefits of that. So tonight is really not designed to critique the minutia of this thing, because it's really not designed to be the final. It's designed to be a general framework, and really more directed to the professionals than to ourselves, because we are the recipient of the data, not the presenter of the data. You know, so I would just ask everyone to have an open mind, think about it, think about in a thoughtful way what the questions are, and allow us collectively to run through these things in the next few weeks to find out what is in fact in the best interest of the town. It is not preordained that the pilot is the best or worst idea. It is an option, maybe not the best option. We might be better suited to address the school issues. We haven't thought about it tonight. We haven't even talked about it yet. So I would ask, when we pose these questions, they should not be designed to necessarily, they should not necessarily be directed to people on the council, because we're not in a position yet to respond, because we haven't thought about it yet. So I'd ask the questions, generally speaking, to be more directed towards the professionals. Of course, you can ask the council and the mayor anything you'd like to ask us, but understand we're not necessarily in a position yet to respond in a defendable way. So with that, I will defer to the mayor.
Mrs. Matula?
Carol Matula, 5 Hastings Road. You began this presentation by talking about 40A, 12A as the statutory basis for this redevelopment plan, and then you ended with saying that there would be public hearings and the public could comment. I want to point out that under this statute, the taxpayers have absolutely no ability to challenge any ordinance or resolution, and that the council has virtually unlimited discretion to do whatever it wants with the plan, regardless of whatever the public says. But I have a few questions in addition. The township has to review some of these plans at some point once this process gets going. Are those costs part of the soft costs?
Yes.
Yes. And of the 4.1 million, what percentage are these costs?
Are you looking at the soft costs for under option 2?
Yes.
There's soft costs of $4,097,000 built into that project.
But I thought that included architect's plans as well.
That includes architectural, engineering, legal, planning. No, the bond is separate. Actually, if I remember, the bond, I can't speak for the accountants, but if you remember, the accountants on their slides that we gave out last week had to tack on a separate number, because I don't want to speak for them, but under the certain type of law, you can't put those soft costs into here. So the accountants' numbers were separate, but the 20% is for all of the professional fees.
But these professional fees will have to be done before the architects draw up the final plans. Am I correct on that?
It would be some of that, yes. I mean, it would be a process. What would you do is, when I went back to that slide, it showed the A&E, architectural and engineering. The township would have to get competitive bids. They'd have to assign the project to an architectural and engineering firm, and that firm would start the process of developing, say, the Church of the Little Flower campus. And then the same thing would happen with the Snyder Avenue campus. And that would start the process of using that 20%.
But in order, for example, to evaluate the traffic studies and other things, before the buildings even get designed, what I'm trying to find out is how much do we have to spend? Is it is roughly half of this cost, the cost that the township would have to spend to review the types of studies that are needed?
Sorry? Yeah, I mean, the architects are telling me, and I agree with them, it's a fraction of that, but I don't feel comfortable giving you a number. I'd have to think about that and get back to you. It's a good question. How much do you have to spend before you get more real numbers? Now, the RFQ, RFP process for the complex at our property, that cost would be placed on the developers through the RFP and RFQ process. The township doesn't pay for that. The developers would pay for that. I don't know if you were in town hall a number of weeks ago, a group came in and they wanted to make a presentation. Somebody talked about the King's property. At their cost, their dime, they hired a series of professionals, traffic engineers, architects, designers, planners, etc., and they did their studies, their plans, and they came in and they did a presentation, a very informal presentation to the township. It would be similar to that process, but a lot more in depth. But all of that cost is on the developer for the municipal complex property. Now, the township would have to spend, you're correct, the township would have to start spending money on where the township facilities would go in Snyder Avenue and Hamilton Avenue.
And how would,
Mrs. Matul, your time is up. Mr. Forager?
Tom Forager, 14 Dorset Road. You mentioned that there was a possibility of a light at Plainfield and Park Avenue. Is it even possible to put a light there?
Yes, I'm not a traffic engineer, but yes.
Okay, how about, did you look at whether I saw you had a lot of traffic that was going to come out of the complex and you were going to dump it out right by Bolton Boulevard, right onto Park Avenue. Did you look into whether you needed a light there?
Yes, we did, and the answer is no.
No light there. How about if that traffic decides to continue on Bolton Boulevard? Are you going to have to widen Bolton Boulevard?
No.
No? Okay.
That's,
And
again, if you, in the packet for tonight, there's a detailed traffic impact analysis, and that's a very good question. It's one of the questions I asked to them about any widening on Bolton, and it wasn't necessary.
okay. And when you looked at the impact number of school children, you came up with 20, but that was just basically 20 kids living at that complex, right, in the 148 units, right? But you,
It's public school-age children. There's actually a slightly higher number, but then they take a certain percentage out because out of any group, a certain percentage goes to private schools, et cetera. So there's a
Right.
calculation for that.
okay, but now, wouldn't there also be the effect of some of the people deciding to downsize and move in from Berkeley Heights and then move into these units? Or are you assuming that all these people are just going to come from out of town?
I'm not assuming anything. I'm using the demographics that I have to give the
Okay.
best answer that I can.
All right,
I mean,
so, but
the
there would
question
be,
is if somebody were to move, if somebody without kids were to sell their house and then move into this complex, and
Right.
then their house would be sold and a family would move
Right.
into that house and have children and so forth.
right,
Sure.
so that particular kind of effect is ignored then?
Well, it's not ignored. I
It's
just,
not taken into account?
correct.
Okay. And I can't read my notes. I'm sorry. I'll have to come back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Oh, he came from over here, so, I don't.
Ladies first.
Regina Erickson, 21 Shady Grove Lane. On the handout, option 2 with alternate design plan, do you have a slide or something that gives some context to this?
There should be attached to that, there should be 2 plans, one showing the proposed improvements on Snyder Avenue and then the Hamilton Avenue.
I'm speaking specifically to the Snyder Avenue plan. Do you have some context to put this in? You talked about a 90-foot buffer. Is that minimum dimension the 90-foot, or is the larger dimension the 90-foot? I can't quite tell because there's no context. The river isn't on here.
From the back of the building, you see what does it say? 8 bay? I'm sorry.
Right, those buildings are interesting. The building that I'm most concerned about is my building, which I'd like to know just some context for this drawing.
Okay, there's one dimension here from the back of that building that I'm referencing to the property line. It's 90 feet.
Okay, so the dimension from the building, not the undisturbed buffer area.
That's correct. It's 90 feet from the property line to the back of the building, correct?
Okay, so the whole thing will not be buffered.
No, it looks like there's a small area behind it. I don't know what that width is, but again.
No, neither do I. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Based on that dimension, I would guess that it's a plus or minus 10 feet, but I really shouldn't say that because it's a guess.
Not helpful to guess. I'm sorry. I really need to know if possible.
I can get you an exact dimension.
Okay.
The only thing is, I didn't prepare this plan, so I don't want to check with the architects.
Is
but
it
just
on the disc? Can I find it somewhere on one of the discs?
The dimension that you're looking for between the back of that building and the proposed tree line, I don't believe it's on a disc, but I can get that number for you. But I just keep in mind this is very conceptual, and they probably just drew a line to have an area behind that building. I'm being told it's 90 feet total with approximately 80 feet of woods and about 10 feet of a grass area behind the building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir?
Jess Jermansky, 30 Lawrence Drive. So what I'd like to know is some sort of a time frame. You've done a really good job of kind of outlining the last 4 meetings that we were going to have, which we really needed to kind of have this foundation that everybody is now talking about. But I'm wondering what's the time frame that we move from here? There was a potential meeting that was going to be on October the 20th. It would seem to me that there's a great need to continue the conversation. That might not be the right time for it, but so that's my question to you is, what kind of time frame are we talking about? What comes next?
Kevin?
Yeah, if I can, two markers for you. So I guess the major milestone is what coming up with an action plan that is agreed upon by the council and defendable publicly. So in the course of the next several weeks, each of the council people and the mayor will, review all the information presented and come up with a rather formal opinion as to the merits, the priorities, the focus, and the direction. Within the next few council meetings, I'll ask everyone to sort of voice those opinions publicly so they can sort of defend what their position is on this, and then to talk in a conference setting as to what would be the best course of action to go. Once there's agreement, it will be my recommendation to come up with a specific action plan. Do we go forward or not? What path do we take, option 1, option 2, or option some ed, whichever one we agree on. and have that memorialized in the form of either a resolution or an ordinance. I'm not sure the nature of the legal documentation that memorializes that, but that would have to be voted on in public session, and then we would proceed. In terms of timing, I would anticipate this being post-election. So, there's an election coming up the first week in November, as I'm sure everyone is aware. We'll want to make sure that the then seated governing body would be in a position to actually vote on, what that path is. So, time frame, I would say that during the month of November, we should be in a position to actually start to talk and to defend what that action plan is, and be in a position to discuss it, vote on it, and move forward. But it would be a November, December timeframe to get that done.
And then within that time frame, where along that and how along that time frame do you capture the public opinion in terms of the greater knowledge of plan, right? The moving more to concrete from the very conceptual issues that we're talking about over this set of meetings. What's the plan for capturing public comment on that?
I think we're going to have to, at each of the council meetings, have a dedicated conference session dedicated to this particular issue, right? So at each meeting, council people can bring up questions and/or respond to questions previously stated that we didn't have an answer to. So it'll be sort of a Q&A, which will be orchestrated on a formal basis in each of the council meetings going forward. So just so for people who do not typically go to council meetings, they right at the beginning of the meeting, there is a conference session which sort of takes place before the formal agenda is actually discussed and voted on, where there's an open dialogue. Nothing is determined, but there's an open dialogue. That's called the conference session. And we'll have a specific conference session which is dedicated to each of the meetings. So that will be a venue to allow that exchange to take place. Every other Tuesday. If you go on the website, it will give you a formal schedule.
Stephen, it's on the website. We don't need your comment on it, okay? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And so at the meetings at which the conference on this particular issue would occur, you're talking about that all being November or within the October-November timeframe?
To be honest with you, we haven't really figured out a formal schedule yet. I think that we cannot be in a position to vote on an action plan until we've thought about it, discussed it, and we actually know who constitutes the governing body to vote on it. You know, so I can sort of say that moving into a November, December, like a post-election time frame before this thing starts to go.
And then my last question kind of relates to all of the different piece parts of this, right? You know, we're weaving a tapestry here, right? How do we pull at individual threads? And how does that vote occur? If we're not happy with the redevelopment plan, what does that mean as we push all the way back into simply the swap? If we are trying to figure out about the library as an alternative, if we don't do the swap, how does that fit in to the kind of that whole woven tapestry?
I'll respond this way. That the action plan, quote unquote, does not constitute necessarily an ordinance to vote on, move forward. We have to talk to the planner to find out, you know, what are the constituent parts of that action plan. I mean, part of this is this whole issue of the redevelopment. What do we do with the Park Avenue property? We have not, frankly, talked among ourselves at length about that. We've talked in broad strokes, but there's been no formal dialogue at all at the governing body level as to what the specifics are of a potential redevelopment plan with respect to that property yet, you know? So during these conference sessions, one of the issues is to find out what is contained in that action plan that we're actually going to vote on. That would give the public the opportunity to understand what the thought process is, what all the threads are which are contained within that action plan. We'll be asking our planner to be actively involved to help us organize those discussions to make sure we don't miss any of the threads, so to speak. So I feel very comfortable that we will be very, very transparent with regards to everything we're talking about. We'll welcome all public input, try to respond to any question. I think some of the questions tonight were brilliant questions, which I haven't thought about myself, actually. And only when we're in a position that we feel that we've really framed this thing, we understand what the moving parts are, and we can actually defend what that action plan is, only then would we present it to the governing body for a vote. We're not going to try to jam anything through, because frankly, this is probably the largest single initiative that the town has embraced in the last 100 years. I mean, this is a major, major threshold event for the town. We appreciate the gravity of that, and we're going to move slowly and methodically through the process.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Michael Merlo, 40 Overhill Way. Couple questions. Question number one, can the developer put all apartments in that piece of property rather than apartments and townhouses?
We have a blank piece of paper right now, so there's nothing set in stone. We can go non-residential, we can go all townhouses, we can go all apartments. Again, I just want to say this. I came up with this idea as a starting point to have a conversation, to see, we have to start somewhere, and that's what I came up with. So this is not set in stone.
Okay.
And to answer your question, yes.
Okay. Question two, Plainfield Avenue is a county road. Do we need county approval for any construction on that site?
Any improvements within the Plainfield Avenue, yes, you would need county approval.
So the county will have to approve any plan that we come up with as a town?
Correct.
Okay. Question three, that this pilot thing intrigues me, and I'll tell you where I'm coming. The library is in such disrepair. Everybody claims, right? And part of option two is a swap with Little Flower, where Little Flower is getting cash and the library. If Little Flower decides that the cash is not enough because the library is in such disrepair, it's going to cost them more than $2.8 million. Can that, putting the library or getting the library up to code, can that be part of the pilot? Can the developer, can you actually ask the developer, I mean, it's town property, you own the library, can that be part of the pilot to have him bring the library up to code?
Only, in my opinion, and I would defer to the township attorney on this, but my opinion would be only if the township then went back and amended the redevelopment study and declared that area in need of redevelopment, so that all of the both properties would be under the local redevelopment housing law. Is that?
Yeah, if we're proceeding with, and not proceeding with the swap, so we're keeping the existing library, and then well, that's an interesting question, because I don't think you could really do that, because if we're proceeding with the swap,
right,
then we're not going to own the library, so there is no improvements to the library to be made.
Before the swap is done, you own the library. And if that's the condition of the sale, let's say the church comes back to you and says 2.8 million is not enough. It's going to cost us more to fix the library than 2.8 million. So you fix the library, then we do the swap, and the 2.8 million is fine.
That's not part of the agreement.
Yeah, no.
That's not, all right.
That's not part of the agreement.
You have an
right now.
agreement already with the church.
We have a memorandum of agreement.
With the church.
With the church, and that's not part of it, because if that were the case, we could say your school and your auditorium isn't up to stuff, so you fix it before we keep on going.
But your architect at the second meeting said the school and the gymnasium was not in bad shape, but the library is in horrible shape. Right? The furnace doesn't work, it floods, the toilets back up, it doesn't meet code, the windows are no good, and you're swapping 15 acres for 1 acre.
If you want my house and you want to buy it the way it is, you buy it the way it is. There's no gun to
Yeah, but the
head.
township committee, I know you guys have a heart, and you're going to do the
Not
best
so
thing
much.
for the whole town.
Yeah,
Right? I mean, come on.
it's a business deal right now.
And as I addressed on the first meeting, there in the MOU with the Little Flower Church, there are contingencies on both sides. So if some of the contingencies don't meet on either side, either party can get out of the agreement, because this is, at this point, it's just a memorandum of understanding.
If we fix that library up, then the price of the library goes up, because we've already fixed it up. So, yeah, they know what they're getting into, and we know what we're getting into as far as condition of the buildings. So,
Thank you.
you know, the price for the library would go up.
Which means that they would get less money.
Correct.
Thank you.
Ron Hoke, 42 Surrey Lane. I've had some experience in project development work in my previous life, and I understand that you're in the early stages of this work, and I'd like to compliment you for the professional quality of the work that you've done so far. I have a question, though. Mr. Mistretta, you mentioned that the pilot option would bring in about $340,000 in revenue to the township. If you use the conventional tax system, it would bring in about $140,000 based on a gross income of about $800,000. But that $800,000, assuming that, as usual, about 60% goes to support the school system, represents a potential of about $500,000 increased revenue for the school system. Isn't that correct?
Under the standard tax rate, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Kathleen Connect, 18 Columbia Avenue. You said nothing would happen to Bolton Avenue. Can you tell me what might happen to Berkeley Avenue if there's construction done? Berkeley
Honestly-
Avenue, in particular, the unpaved part of it. If there is building and the townhouses go up, what will happen to Berkeley Avenue?
Honestly, I don't have an answer for it. I mean, I could refer you to the traffic report, but we haven't gone that far into...
So nobody has surveyed that property at all to see if that can be widened?
I have not, no. Well, none of that's been authorized yet.
And no one has surveyed Bolton Boulevard either? Nobody has talked about making that into a double-wide street?
No.
And nobody has
No.
talked about widening Berkeley and making it go all the way through?
No.
I really have to know.
No, nobody's...
Not at all. So
all
if
of the-
something goes there, like, it will not go through?
Everything related to traffic is contained in the 2 traffic reports that were given out tonight, and they...
Okay, I didn't see it. Can you tell me? Because my house is 15 feet from the paper street, my bedroom.
There's nothing...
The talk around town is that that's going to be paved through and Bolton is going to be widened.
Well,
It's absolutely not true?
I could tell you, I've been handling that
Yeah.
portion of it, and that is, it couldn't be
Not
further
true.
from the truth.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay.
And I would just refer you, so you know what is out there.
Mhm.
It's these 2 traffic studies. They're done by traffic engineers that looked at all of the right-of-ways and so forth. I just refer you to
Oh,
those.
thank goodness, because I was about to sell. Okay, but I'm so glad that I stopped by tonight, because this is a lot more than a swap. I mean, this is going to change the whole flavor of Berkeley Heights. And I don't think that's what people understand. I mean, I grew up in this town, and I love it. It's a sleepy little town, and that's why I haven't moved. I love it here. And, you know, all of a sudden, all these condos are going in. Who asked for them? Why are we doing it? Why do we want to make our train station look like Summit, or those pictures look like Hoboken? I don't want that for our town. The people that moved here, I ask you to think of this when you're thinking about all this construction. Whose vision is this? It's not my vision. Do I want to walk downtown Berkeley Heights? I don't know if anyone else agrees, and I'm sorry if somebody here bought one of the properties over the little news place in town. But that thing does not blend in with this community at all. I thought over time it would. I mean, I really did. I thought I would get used to that building. I am not used to it at all. And then we put the gas station in with, it looks like Route 22 with the sign that's lit up. I thought I would get used to that. I am not used to it. I'm sorry. I mean, I can see you're doing a good job, like, okay, we have another bank. At least it's brick, okay? But why are we destroying this town? It's such a mishmash. I mean, that sign, I'm never going to get used to that neon sign downtown. I'm never going to get used to that tall building. And if you make the train station look like Summit or Hoboken, I'm never going to get used to that either. That's not why we live here. Who moved here for that? If they moved here for that, I mean, they wouldn't have bought here. They would have went to Summit. They would have went to a city. This is the township of Berkeley Heights. Sleepy town, Berkeley Heights. That's what we like. Who is going to move in to those condos at the train station a single person. Why? What do we have downtown? I love it, but what do we have? We have nothing for them here. I'm sorry. I mean, I like my nephews to stay in town and move there, and they could go in and out of Hoboken and such, but they'll move to Hoboken then. There's nothing in Berkeley Heights for the commuter, like a single commuter. I'm sorry, there's just nothing there. I mean, we have that new little clothing shop. How long is that gonna last? I mean, are they gonna come? They're gonna come for Subway, and they're gonna come for Delicious Heights. Thank God for Delicious Heights. I mean, at least the poor people that did buy in town that are single can at least go there. But, I mean, I just wanna know, first of all, like I said, this is a lot more than a swap. Who is gonna tell everyone in town? And I'd hate to think that all of you down here would have the burden of making this decision for all of these people, because this is changing the flavor of Berkeley Heights. It's not my vision. I don't think it's their vision. You cannot make a decision for all of these people without putting this to a vote. And if it doesn't go to a vote, this is not America. I'm sorry. It's too much. This is my town. I love it. I think these people love it the way it is, and it should stay the way it is. I'm sorry. Those pictures were horrifying. Makes me want to go home and cry. I want to tell everyone about it. They think it's a swap. They think they're getting a nice rec center, Whippy. I mean, it's great. We're going to get a nice rec center. That's fantastic. I mean, I think that would be great. We need some improvements in town. The police station needs to be improved. It's falling apart. But can't we do that without changing the flavor of this town? Please.
Ma'am, thank you for your
Please.
comments. Appreciate it. Ma'am?
Connie Crawford, I live at 77 Park Avenue, so we've seen it up there a couple times. It's on the corner of Berkeley Avenue and Park Avenue on the west side, the little house that... So my house is 100 years old. It sits almost on the property line, about a foot inside the property line. If Berkeley Avenue has to be widened, as a plan I saw a couple months ago, in order for traffic to get out of that complex, right now I've got an effective setback of 10 or 12 feet. If it's widened, I lose that setback, and I lose the entrance to my house. I mean, that's what it says, that you have to provide a new entrance, like through my stove or something, if you move it around to the side of the house. And I mean, are you looking at acquiring property on the other side so you don't have to take my house?
No, we're not looking at any property, ma'am. I don't know what survey you're looking at. There is no
It's the plan that Mr. Mistretta issued a couple months ago.
The only plan on Berkeley Avenue is the one on the municipal side where there's no houses right now. There's no plan at all to widen across Park Avenue, not at all.
No. Berkeley Avenue, you have to widen Berkeley Avenue as an exit out of this complex.
There is no plan to do that now, right now.
There's no plans of widening Berkeley Avenue.
Over its current curb lines?
It's no plan at all.
We haven't.
Okay, so what you had 2 months ago, you've changed?
I don't know what plan you're referring to.
Well, I mean, you even said you have to provide entrances to my house and my driveway, that you have to make other accommodations?
There's two properties. Your house is one, and there's another property that utilize existing right-of-ways that are within the redevelopment area.
Right.
Any project, any type of development would have to maintain those driveways. That's the only point that I was trying to make.
And the entrance to my house as well, I assume?
And the entrance to your house. There's no taking of land on any private properties. There's no widening that would take any land on your property or anybody
All right,
else's.
but the town property line is a foot outside my house. Are you going all the way up to that 1 foot limit? Are you
No.
using up all the land that the town actually
No.
owns? Or do
No.
I have that easements continue?
There's no taking of your land or anybody else's land for this project.
Okay, but
One.
without taking land, you can be 1 foot from my house. Is that the plan?
There is no plan. In order
Okay.
to tell you that, in order to answer your question, there would have to be an engineered plan that would show traffic flow and curb and crowns and so on. We're nowhere near anything like that. This is just, my office put together a conceptual idea just to have a conversation starting tonight about what if we did this. No more thought than that. I don't know what plan you're referring to about a couple months ago.
Well, the planning,
I
at the
haven't-
planning board meeting, the blight meeting.
That
You
was the
showed a
redevelopment-
plan that showed a 4 lanes coming out, I guess maybe 2 parking
I-
lanes and
I-
2, and
I s-
that, if you do that, I lose my stoop.
I handled the redevelopment study, I did all the testimony. The only map that I released as part of the redevelopment study hearings is the same map that's up on an easel right now and down in the municipal courtroom, which is just an outbound of the properties that we're talking about. There's no roads, there's no sidewalks, there's no widening. That, I prepared that map. That map shows no improvements whatsoever. It's tonight, it's in the courtroom, and it's part of the maps that we gave out in the first hearing. There's no improvements shown on that map, period.
All right, well, I'll
There's-
take
there's-
another look at it then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Michelle Ziska, 95 Spring Ridge Drive. I have 2 questions. My first question is, someone had asked about a master plan. So my question to you is, do you have a strategic master plan for this town, and did this fit into the master plan?
We do have a master plan for this town, and I believe Mr. Mistretta will answer for balance.
The last 2 master plans, there's one prepared in 1999 by Robert Michaels, which calls for the redevelopment of the municipal complex. Then there's another master plan that I wrote along with the planning board and a master plan subcommittee in September of 2007, which also talks about the future redevelopment of this property. And that master plan even talks about a swap in a very general terms. And it talks about the need for revitalizing the community facilities. It does not go into specifics of what should we put here. It doesn't go into that type of detail. The master plan does, though, provide recommendations for the redevelopment of the municipal complex.
But don't you think it should go into detail, considering there are so many different plans on the planning board regarding townhouses and condos? They've talked about Locust Street. They've also talked about Berkeley Florist being townhouses. Then you have Kings, and now you have this. And obviously, the big point here is the fact, the density. No one really wants another 150, and then 100 on Springfield, and 100 on Locust, and then 100 by Kings. So you're talking about 500 townhouses and condos. And that, to me, seems ridiculous for the town of Berkeley Heights. We are a quiet, sleepy town. And it doesn't seem that there is a plan, because if there was, something like this would never be approved. We want the revenue, we want the rateable, but I just don't think the density, I don't think 150 units is feasible down there, and there should be another option for the people of Berkeley Heights. It shouldn't just be townhouses and condos. There should be something else. I think you guys, with your collective intelligence, and maybe people in this town, could find something else besides townhouses and condos.
Ma'am, to answer your question, we had a developer come before us about a month and a half ago with his initial plan for the King's property. There has been no development since
But-
that.
Okay, but it is on the plan.
There
We
is
know
no plan.
But we know
That-
Berkeley Florist was sold to a builder. We
That
know
plan,
exactly who it is.
that plan has to go before the planning board again. I
Okay,
think
but
it's,
let's say that it all gets approved.
let's say it doesn't.
Okay, well, let's say it doesn't, then let's all cheer
Okay.
that it doesn't.
Every plan must go before the planning board, and the density issues, the height issues will all be at public meetings, but, there is no density at the King's property as yet. There's no, at Locust, and by the pool, there's no proposal there as yet. And the one on where the Berkeley Forest was, I believe has to go before, because that's met its limit. So right now, we're not talking about any of those things, and when we do, they'll be at public meetings.
Okay, and are they on the strategic plan for the town of Berkeley Heights?
No, not as yet.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a quickie, maybe. Len Berkowitz, 140 Kent Drive. And I think Ron Hook already made this point, but I think the pilot, lower tax level with a pilot is a little misleading, because diverting that 500,000 or so from the school board, from the school tax, will have a much bigger delta effect on our school tax. So in all fairness, it would be good to reflect the total municipal plus school tax, even if you have to get some help from the school board to show that. Everybody cares about the total tax, not just the municipal portion, which is pretty much the smallest.
Jerry Kuzmic, Eaton Court. From what I understand, many months ago, the church diocese, have they approached Berkeley Heights with an interest of an exchange of properties?
The Church of the Little Flower approached us. That's how this started.
Uh-huh. Did they, by chance, give a timing element as to a feedback necessary on their behalf to make such a exchange? Did they give you any kind of dates?
We have a memorandum of understanding right now, but you asked me when they're going to build their church?
No, I'm asking you if they gave any kind of stipulation that they're looking for feedback in reference to making in a real estate exchange.
Kevin?
The short answer is,
Talk into Mike, please.
sorry. The memorandum of understanding, which is a document which is executed between the town and Little Flower, makes no reference to any particular time frame. So there are conditions that have to be met or satisfied to the benefit of the township, and separately the church, for us to agree to this land swap. None of them relate to time frame. Understanding how fluid the situation is, how many different variables have to be researched and discussed, we had to agree strategically that we would like to entertain this land swap, but we have to allow each other the opportunity to study the opportunity to see whether it works or it does not work. So each person sort of has a put option on this thing to allow them to exit the agreement if it's not feasible on either side. So understanding the amount of work that has to be done to truly be able to truly commit to this thing contractually, we could not include a specific time frame in it. So the short answer to that long diatribe is no.
No.
Mr. Hall, if I may, just to follow up, there is a date in the MOU of April 2015, and that is the expiration of the MOU unless otherwise extended or a more formal agreement is entered. It doesn't take away anything that Councilman Hall said. However, I just want to be clear, because when people see in the MOU there is a date, that is just a date to set some type of, to keep everybody moving forward on it. And prior to that date, either the MOU would be extended or a more formal agreement will be entered, or if that time it was determined that the swap isn't in the best interest of either party, then one of the contingencies could be exercised. But that is the one date that is set forth.
In the memo that you received?
I stand corrected.
Okay. I guess my reasoning here of trying to understand this whole dilemma is that if the church approached Berkeley Heights with the interest of exchange of property, they're having some stress in maintaining that property, and they'd like to get rid of it as quickly as possible, or they're going to continue to be stressed out with what their intentions are initially of wanting to dispose of such properties. Now, they came to Berkeley Heights, and they had an interest of a property exchange. I'm trying to come to a conclusion here to say, if there's a date that they want feedback, or as you stipulated, in 2015, somehow or another, who's pressuring who? Is Township of Berkeley Heights pressuring the church diocese, or is the diocese pressuring Berkeley Heights as to what kind of an exchange is really set forth?
I don't think there's any pressure on either side. I think that, I'm not speaking on behalf of Little Flower, but I think that they are looking at their strategic needs and goals. The township is looking at its strategic needs and goals. And we're trying to see if there's an opportunity where this land swap could address the needs and concerns of both parties involved. I mean, it's my understanding that the Little Flower is looking to sort of resize and reposition itself as a parish. And part of that relates to the maintenance of this property. There's an economic consideration. The fact that this MOU has a deadline, so to speak, is introduced by the attorney, which is more of a tactical issue just to make sure that the documents remain current, does not necessarily speak to the economic viability of that parish or the township. So I don't think there's any pressure per se from an economics point of view. Well, there's none that I'm aware of.
The properties that the church is of interest of exchanging, that is tax exempt property tax
That's
in the
correct.
township of Berkeley Heights.
That's correct.
Interesting. Plus the fact is, they're looking to get the fair value of that property, of course, based on the fact of all the renovations and updating that's necessary on behalf of all properties.
By law, we have to make sure that this swap is fair and equitable. So I mean, that what determines the valuation of each of these properties is sort of a rules-driven issue. So yes, they are looking to maximize the value on that swap within the constraints of what's fair and legal.
Okay, in which case, whatever dollars are going to end up to be as such will be used to expand their property on Plainfield Avenue, which currently exists as the little church.
That's correct.
Interesting, interesting, interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Richard Leister, 49 Summit Avenue. I'm understanding that we're not necessarily locked into 135 or 148 units of apartments and townhouses. Just wondering whether you also gave some thought to having individual residences there, that is, individual houses on that property, and if you did, what might be the consequences of that?
You would have, if you went with single-family homes, 9 acres, 4 per acre, about 36 off the top of my head. I did not spend a whole lot of time looking at that because that's the math. It's pretty straightforward. It wouldn't take a lot of effort to do that type of study, so. But like I said, we're not set into any numbers. I just started somewhere where I thought was a reasonable place to start the conversation.
George Mitrowitz, 9 York Place. I happen to enjoy the way the town is now as well as some of the other people here. Especially, I like the idea that the police department is right near the train station. It helps defray and detract from any type of crime because it's a known presence that's always there. I have a question about the Upper Church property. If the town takes over the Upper Church property, is there anything that can keep them from selling part of that property to develop there as opposed to at the train station area?
You're saying
Talking about
if
the township?
Well, in the swap, if the town gets the Upper Church property,
right?
okay, can't the town develop or sell the property to a developer in that area, part of it, subdivide it, rezone it, whatever needs to be done, so that we could build there? If we're doing this just to defray costs to the taxpayers, which is why I'm assuming why we want to develop the train station area, is to defray costs towards the taxpayers, correct? So if there's a lot of property at the Upper Church that's going to be the town's property at one point, can it be rezoned, partially sold off, and develop there? I think that would have less of an economic impact or environmental impact on the total community there. There's more inlets and outlets there. It doesn't affect the train station crossing or anything like that. And to be honest, I like where, and other people probably would too, that the police department's in a great strategic location right now. And I believe it should stay there, whatever we need to do to it to get it up to code or what need be. But if you move some of the municipality offices up to the Upper Church property, but subdivide that area so you can sell property to developers to defray costs, whether it be for tax reasons or whatever. Because I'm sure everybody doesn't want their tax bill to go up $1,000 a year just for this one issue. And I happen to be a parishioner at Little Flower. I understand the predicament the church is in. But I haven't heard anybody mention using the upper church property in a different way that might benefit everybody as well and help defray those costs that the project would if we did it near the train station location. So is there anything preventing any development happening up there on the upper church property once the town would take over that property?
My first question would be, is there anything in any of the reverter clause or any of those issues that come into play? And I'm not too familiar with those, so I don't want to speak out of turn here. Is there anything in the underlying agreements?
No, there wouldn't be anything with the reverter clause, because once we took ownership of the property, that reverter clause would then become null and void. However, a couple issues or questions would come up. And I mean, one thing we would have to do is do a redevelopment study of that property as subdivided, if it can be subdivided. I don't know if there actually is enough property to maintain a new municipal complex, a new municipal library, the parking for it, and subdivide a portion off to develop. If there is, then we'd have to also do a redevelopment study and determine whether even that area would meet the criteria for a redevelopment. I know Mr. Mastretta went into great lengths on why the existing municipal property would. I'm not sure whether or not the other it could. I just don't know. It's something we'd
I
have
just
to
think
start the
that's
process
another
for.
option that the council should look into before we jump into the proposals we saw today. I realize they're, just ideas, but I haven't heard any ideas of using the property in that fashion that might save the taxpayer money, still get any development we need to do for our own municipal purposes, the police department, the library and everything. And that would just help defray costs and keep most of the town, at least what some people even said, the way our town looks, it wouldn't change the police department area at all, other than you would have to redevelop that building to meet code and to be usable as a current police department.
You would have to raise the police department building and build a new police department on that site, okay? And if we were to do that, then why would we enter into the swap? I mean, I'm trying...
No, I'm for the swap. I'm part of Little Flower Parish, but my point here is that I think you're trying to develop on the current police department site with housing in order to defray taxpayer dollars.
No, we have all this property that we're going to swap for. We have 16 acres up at the Little Flower Parish, which, the building that is now the rectory, it happens to be just about the perfect size for a police department with an addition for a sally port. And then we have the church, the school property, which happens to be just the right size building for a library and town hall offices, with land in the back to move some of the DPW there. And it just seems like if we're going to do this, we do it all up there and then sell the property that we don't need to a developer and put something there. I mean, the something we're coming up with is the complex we've talked about, but it doesn't have to be that complex. But we do know we need a new police station, and it just seems to fit right.
I'm not against the new police station. We could. I'm
Neither is
okay
the prosecutor.
with building it there.
Yeah.
But there's property up at the upper church. There's a lot of property there that could be subdivided and sold off to raise tax dollars to defray taxpayer monies that would be used somewhere along the line so that we don't all have to pay as much as we might have to.
Well, if we develop the police station, we develop the library, and we develop the town hall, that's what we're paying for. And there is a large piece of property there, but a lot of it's wetlands.
But the wetlands is on the one boundary of it, and it's not that much.
The wetlands is all the way around it.
On the upper side too, because I looked at the plans today online, and the wetlands are only on the downhill side.
Right.
So the uphill side, there's woods there. On one side, you have condos. On the other side, there's industrial buildings.
That's where the DPW is going,
So I'm just.
a
yeah,
portion
but
of it.
Do we have to do that? Can't we leave the DPW where it is, so we don't have to worry about environmental cleanup?
We still have to worry about environmental cleanup, although it's going to be on our dime. If it's contaminated, we got to fix it.
I understand that. But the DPW right now, I don't think it's that far out of whack that we need to move it all over town.
Fair point.
You know, and I think one other option is to use the Upper Church property once we get it. I know you could put your municipal building there, put your library there, but then also think about subdividing that, selling that property to a developer. If we need the tax monies that ratables bring, we can maybe get it from that location. And
It's definitely a possibility.
because that would free up the police department. That building now would be all police department, whether you tore it to the ground or just use the building that's existing there. And that would free up all the space we need. The Sallyport would go where the rec center is now. That, the little rec center in the back that's almost nothing. But that's big enough for a Sallyport. And then you free up all the office space in there for the police department. I think that might be another cost-effective way to go about doing this. And I haven't heard this option yet.
I think in our option one, or one of our options, the cost of rebuilding the police department is in there, but we'll check on it.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wants to address the council on this subject? That makes me happy. Mr. Mistretta, you want to wrap up?
I just want to say thank you for everybody coming out and everybody listening. The more people that participate, the more questions that are raised, like the one you just had right there, it lends to a better project at the end of the day. So I just want to say thank you for everybody participating, and I'll refer back to the council as far as future notices and progress and so forth. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Mistretta. Tomorrow night, we have a regular meeting at 7 p.m. in the back at Town Hall. For those of you who want to come, we'd love to have a crowd. What are you shaking your head for? Yes, we do. Can I have a motion to adjourn? I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Good night, folks.